Chapter 602. In the afternoon, Lu Cheng returned to Fartuat port. He didn't greet Consul Mao Xiaobing. Instead, he took a detour through the streets where there were occasional crossfires. He left the city on his own and entered the desert outside the oasis. The scorching sun hung high in the sky. The sunlight seemed to have lost all obstructions and filters, igniting the airflow and burning the sand. Everything that was visible to the naked eye was distorted, like an illusion. While running, Lu Cheng felt a major change in his resonance with heaven and earth. The darkness weakened, the coldness receded, and the brightness, heat, and heaviness became clearer and more intense. It was as if the cosmic map had been enlarged and locked onto the area enveloped by the stellar storm. It's no wonder physical invulnerability experts are so particular about geographical advantage. Different environments can indeed strengthen one's self and weaken one's enemy. With the addition and subtraction of one's environment, the effect is rather obvious. Comparatively speaking, with my balance of heat and cold and the rotation of ice and fire, I'm less restricted. Lu Cheng nodded, deep in thought. He quickened his pace like a high-speed train, whizzing through the vast expanse of yellow sand, leaving behind a terrifying ravine. However, the ravine was quickly covered up by sand and filled in by the strong winds. After making the great leap, he was tempered by the feedback of heaven and earth. His body's strength increased again, but compared to before, there wasn't a substantial leap forward. Even if he continued to temper himself day and night and approached the forbidden zone, it would still be the same. He would become stronger, but only to a limited extent. His greatest change was the sudden increase in his mental strength. The trickling streams converged into a surging river, allowing the ice mirror's range to expand from 1 to 10 meters. During battle, he could also borrow the power of the external world through resonance, increase the power of his punches and kicks, launch long-range attacks, or modify the environment to affect his opponent. As he wasn't a true physical invulnerability expert, his connection with heaven and earth wasn't stable enough. Lu Cheng's usage of the latter would be unstable. Of course, he had also considered an emergency solution, which was to use force concentration and the Dan, formed by balancing and rotating to imitate the cultivators and temporarily reinforce them. As his thoughts raced, Lu Cheng was like a yellow dragon gliding close to the ground. He swept past the sand dunes and the occasional oasis. This time, in less than 2 hours before sunset, he saw Kukhang City, known as the Pearl of Central Nile. It was connected to the famous desert to the west and the Isis River to the east. It was rich in minerals and many enterprises. Tall buildings rose and fell one after another. It could be considered a fairly modern city. In this area, it was only slightly worse than the capital of the Nile, Decca. The sky was blazing red. It was a magnificent sight, casting a crimson veil over the city. Lu Cheng circled around the edge of the huge oasis for a while, and realized that there were checkpoints set up on several important roads. The soldiers were very disciplined. Other than occasionally stealing or taking some rewards, they didn't do anything out of the ordinary. It was a stark contrast to Tetons and Fartuat. 2 words popped into Lu Cheng's mind at the sight of this. Order. The actual ruler of Kukhang is quite capable. He sighed inwardly. He didn't take the main road, but instead, he climbed over many obstacles and quietly entered the city. Passing through a few streets, he saw remnants of crossfire, residents queuing for water with bitter expressions, and fanatical or numb pedestrians. As the Chinese consulate in Kukhang was retreating to Decca, Lu Cheng didn't go there first. Instead, he followed the map and found the vicinity of Gunam Street, apartment 63. This was the residence of Cyrus's son, Gulu. However, there seemed to have been an intense battle here. A few buildings were charred black, the windows were almost completely shattered, and there were clear bullet holes everywhere. In such an environment, the 3rd floor of apartment 63 was particularly eye-catching. The walls facing the street had all collapsed, revealing the dilapidated interior. It seemed to have been ravaged by a demolition team, so much so that it affected both the upper and lower floors. This was a battle between inhuman experts. One side's resistance was relatively short. Otherwise, the entire apartment would have collapsed. Lu Cheng stared at Gulu's residence and made a preliminary judgment. When Uncle Cyrus came to fetch his son and family, he was ambushed. With hostages, he might have surrendered quickly. Then who was the culprit? Lu Cheng looked around and saw that the place was in chaos. Other than corpses, wandering dogs, scurrying rats, and flying bugs, there wasn't a single living person. With the sporadic gunshots in the distance as a backdrop, it was exceptionally quiet and dead. At this moment, Lu Cheng's heart skipped a beat. He turned and looked behind him. Who's there? A black-haired, black-eyed man walked out from the half-collapsed shop. He was in his 30s and had weathered features. His eyes were resolute, and one could tell he was Chinese. I'm Wang Dong, a special investigator from the military. You must be Lu Cheng? The man smiled and took out his identification. Lu Cheng had already retracted his interaction with his surroundings. He no longer had the feeling of disturbing heaven and earth. He nodded solemnly. Yes. Are you here to investigate Cirrus's whereabouts? He wasn't afraid of a sneak attack. Boldly taking the identification, he compared it with the information provided by the military. Wang Dong frowned slightly. After we lost contact with Cirrus, I came to Kukhang and started the investigation. I arrived much earlier than you. At that time, there were still residents who hadn't evacuated. After some questioning and follow-up verification, we can basically confirm that Cirrus and his family were captured by the high priest of the Isis temple. They are currently being held in the temple and are waiting to be dealt with. The temple of Isis? High priest? Lu Cheng returned the identification to him. Wang Dong pondered for a moment and said, when Cirrus sought protection, he revealed many secrets, including the religious conflict in Nile. The Isis sect is loyal to the pharaoh, and the pharaoh seems to want to restore the ancient era of gods. In short, the high priest of the Isis sect in the local temple represents the will of the pharaoh to a certain extent. He isn't weak either, close to physical invulnerability. Previously, General Sotha of the Brotherhood tried to kill him, but for some reason he failed. Other than him, there are 3 to 4 other inhuman mighty ones in the temple. All right. Do you have any more detailed information about the temple and the high priest? Asked Lu Cheng. Quite a lot, including satellite images of the temple, visitors' self-drawn drawings, municipal construction plans. Wang Dong took out a bunch of things from his military backpack. With these, Lu Cheng had a basic understanding of the temple's situation at night. However, he wasn't in a hurry to take action. Instead, he circled around the building in the dark. As though there was an opening in between his eyebrows, his spirit transformed into an invisible hand that extended to cover a 10-meter radius. Every detail was reflected in the ice mirror in his heart lake. No premonition of danger. The Inhumans are a certain distance away. Lu Cheng stopped in his tracks and said to Wang Dong, have you made arrangements for the evacuation? Yes. Wang Dong replied in a deep voice. Then I'll take action. Lu Cheng nodded lightly. Be careful. Wang Dong couldn't help but remind him. All right. Lu Cheng didn't say much. He turned around, extended his hand, and pressed against a protrusion on the wall. He leaped into the air and landed on the edge of a window on the 3rd floor. With a tug of his shoulder, he exerted precise force and directly unloaded the window, placing it flat silently. Leaping in, there was no one inside. Lu Cheng leaned against the door and listened carefully. After sensing carefully for a while, he suddenly opened the door and rushed out. At this moment, there were only 2 guards left in the corridor. They instinctively looked over. Drawing the ancient words in his mind, his eyes were cold and sharp. Lu Cheng only took one look at the 2 strong guards, and it was enough to make them break down mentally. Snot and tears flowed down their faces as though they had encountered a monster from the depths of hell. After the qualitative change of his spirit, the effect of Lu Cheng's simplified army formula had more than doubled. Taking a step forward, he raised both hands and struck out with a karate chop. Lu Cheng knocked the 2 guards unconscious. He circled the circular corridor and rushed to the opposite side silently. That's the high priest's room. Lu Cheng's plan was to capture the ringleader first. He didn't want to waste time trying to find out where Cirrus and his family were being held. His heartbeat slowed down and his breathing weakened. The surface of his body was covered with coldness, which allowed him to avoid the infrared alarm. There's more than one person in the room. Lu Cheng stopped outside the door. Like a god looking down, he used the ice mirror to reflect the blurry situation inside. In this aspect, there was indeed a qualitative difference between an inhuman and a physical invulnerability expert. 2 inhumans, but they are in different small rooms. One of them feels stronger, and there are few of them with average strength or even none. They are together with the weaker inhumans. At this point, Lu Qing understood what was going on. Cirrus and his family were being held in the secret room of the high priest's residence. Just nice, Lu Qing thought to himself. After pondering over the next few details, he suddenly opened the door and entered. The high priest immediately sensed it and stood up from the recliner. He saw a black shadow approaching him and heard the roar of a strong wind. He swung his arms agilely, one up and one down, one blocking and one attacking. Dim light gathered. He wasn't stingy with this. He tried to create a bigger commotion to attract the other mighty ones in the temple. At this moment, a bone-chilling wind that seemed to have come from the depths of the North Pole blew on him, causing him to shiver involuntarily. As he shivered, his strength weakened and his speed slowed down. Lu Cheng's right fist was already coming down on his forearm. Before entering the school, Lu Cheng had prepared a severe warning. He wanted to use it to attract the north wind from the outside world. Bam! Amidst the low sound of the collision, the high priest, who was caught off guard, was momentarily dazed as though he had been frozen. Lu Cheng wouldn't let this go. His left palm struck out at lightning speed and knocked his opponent unconscious. In a breath's time, the outcome was decided. Ambushers did have a huge advantage. He extended his leg and the high priest fell silently before lying down again. Without further delay, Lu Qing found the secret room, broke the lock, and entered. "Who is it?" asked a tanned, muscular, black-haired, blue-eyed elder weakly. He seemed to have been injected with some kind of drug. Before Lu Cheng could answer, the elder blurted out in surprise after seeing the other party's appearance. "You're Shi's disciple?" "Yes, Mr. Cirrus." Lu Cheng sought confirmation. Feeling the cold wind and the interaction between the other party's body and the outside world, the blue-eyed elder nodded, puzzled and delighted. "I'm Cirrus." After answering, he muttered to himself, "I didn't say he was that strong. Let's leave this place first." Lu Cheng looked around and made a decision. In a building near the military base, Constantine looked at the mummy with a bored expression. "Is your helper not here yet?" "Probably until daybreak," replied the mummy calmly. At this moment, someone came in and whispered a few words to the guard outside. The guard turned around and knocked on the door, inviting the mummy out. After a while, the mummy came back and said to Constantine, "Something happened at the temple. There's a little worm causing trouble. I'm going to deal with it." Constantine shrugged and said, "Come back quickly. Don't let me get bored." Chapter 603. In the Isis temple, Lu Cheng and the rest had just walked out of the secret chamber when Cirrus looked around and saw the high priest lying unconscious on the recliner. He didn't say much and walked weakly at the back of the group. When he passed by the lounge chair, he suddenly squatted down and leaned against it. Gathering all his remaining strength, he smashed his elbow into the high priest's neck, breaking his throat and breaking his cervical vertebrae. Without a sound, he went to meet Mother Earth. This turn of events was out of Lu Cheng's expectations. He looked over in shock and blurted out, "Mr. Cirrus?" In order to prevent the high priest from waking up and causing any accidents, he had used the reflector to monitor the surroundings. He didn't expect Cirrus to suddenly attack, and it was too late to stop him. Cirrus supported himself on the armrest and stood up while panting. He revealed a smile and said, "If he's alive, he'll expose us. You don't want to have 2, 3, or even a few demigods chasing after you, right?" "Of course. Kukhang definitely doesn't have that many experts. I'm just giving an extreme example." His son and daughter-in-law were extremely frightened. They each covered the mouth of a child to prevent them from screaming uncontrollably. Lu Cheng thought for a few seconds and nodded thoughtfully. He turned around and led Cirrus and his family back the way they came. From the place where the window was removed, he threw them one by one. Special Investigator Wang Dong caught them one by one. The entire process was carried out silently and didn't disturb the stray dogs and cats nearby. In the end, Lu Cheng created a vibration and sent a voice transmission to his companions. "You guys leave first. I'll take care of the aftermath. We'll meet at the predetermined location." "What aftermath?" Wang Dong was confused, but his professionalism didn't allow him to delay. He led Cirrus and his family away and disappeared into the night. Lu Cheng turned around and snuck into the high priest's room again. Due to the privacy of the higher-ups, there were only surveillance devices in the secret chamber. This time, he used his fists and legs to control his muscles, fascia, and force. He used the friction between them and the air to counteract the sound of his body shattering the tables and chairs, cracking the walls, and burning the floor. If there was an outsider here, he would definitely be horrified. It was as if Lu Cheng was fighting a silent battle with an invisible ghost. Everything was like a silent color film at the beginning of the last century. Such control was extremely demanding, and Lu Cheng didn't have the supernatural ability of sonic wave. If it weren't for the qualitative change in his mind and the improvement in his realm of all-seeing God, he definitely wouldn't have been able to complete such a feat. Even so, he had no choice but to slow down his movements to ensure precision. In the end, he was sweating profusely. After a little looting, he filled a luggage bag with gold and jewels. They all had the unique charm of the Nile, and there was no lack of antiques among them. When he was done, Lu Cheng left the high priest's room with his back bowed and back bent. He circled the circular corridor like a ghost and returned to his original spot. He leaped down from the third floor, which had lost its window. He retracted his chi and blood in midair, adjusted his strength, and landed steadily and silently. Like a civet cat, he blended into the darkness. A few minutes later, the patrolling guards discovered their comrade who had fainted. They then noticed the abnormality in the high priest's residence. Another 15 minutes later, Lu Cheng saw Wang Dong, Cirrus, and a few others in a parking lot in the north of Kukang. The engine of a modified SUV was still running, and it was ready to leave. "Why are you going back?" Wang Dong asked in a seemingly casual manner. "Thanks to Senior Cirrus's teachings, I've learned a lot. I'm going back to leave some evidence for them." Lu Cheng smiled and sighed. He glanced at Cirrus and replied in Hua Nation. "Evidence?" Wang Dong was half puzzled and half guessing. "Are you trying to mislead the possible pursuers?" "Yes. Let's first assume that there are experts at the temple who are adept at tracking. It's better to be prepared," explained Lu Cheng. Wang Dong nodded thoughtfully. He turned around and opened the door to the driver's seat. "Let's talk on the way." At the temple, the mummy rushed to the high priest's room and observed the scene. Aside from his face, his exposed skin was wrapped in yellowish-white bandages. His face was covered with a thick beard that concealed his facial features. "An intense battle, but no one heard it," muttered the mummy softly. He made a judgment. The attacker should have the supernatural ability to block out sound. His standard is slightly higher than the high priest's. The fact that they could fight to such an extent in a surprise attack was enough to show the level of the attacker. At this thought, the mummy turned to the remaining priests. "Did you see anything from the surveillance?" "Yes." A skinny priest asked the supervisor in charge of surveillance to bring in a laptop and replay the surveillance footage. There was footage of Lu Cheng jumping to the third floor and dismantling the window. There was footage of him attacking two guards and knocking them unconscious. There was footage of him returning and collecting a group of loot bags. In these videos, due to Lu Cheng's deliberate evasiveness, his face was never recorded. They could only determine that he was an Asian based on his facial features. "Why didn't you discover him on the spot?" asked the mummy in a deep voice. "It happened in the blink of an eye. If you don't slow down the video, it's hard to determine if it's an illusion or reality," explained the supervisor in a fluster. More importantly, there were so many cameras and so many images. The temple had never placed much emphasis on the power of technology. He didn't have many subordinates, and it was late at night. How could they discover something that happened in a flash? The mummy glanced at the supervisor coldly. "That's your problem." As soon as he finished, he reached out and grabbed the supervisor by the neck, lifting the fat and round man up. "No!" The supervisor's voice was choked out in his throat, like the cry of a dying rooster. His hands and feet struggled a few times, but they quickly lost their strength. His moist skin quickly weathered and dried up. In less than 30 seconds, he lost all signs of life and turned into a real mummy. Thump! The mummy loosened his grip and let the supervisor fall to the floor. "I'll go and catch them," said the mummy in a deep voice. The mummy said in a low voice. Then, he muttered in anger and disdain, "An inhuman from China. A greedy inhuman." He took out a bandage and wrapped it around his head again and again, leaving only his two eyeballs uncovered. At first glance, he was already a real mummy. Even his aura had become dim, faintly discernible, as if he was dead. The aura of life. The taste of life. The mummy opened his arms and embraced nature, muttering cryptically. His surroundings instantly turned dark. In the tiniest places, there seemed to be oil stains shining. There were strange light spots rising in a riot of colors, swaying in the air, each different from the other. It was as if the underworld had descended, causing the priests to lower their noble heads. "Found you," said the mummy suddenly. Before he could finish his sentence, his figure had already disappeared from the room. Under the night sky, the heat of the day dissipated. The surrounding yellow sand was quiet. A modified MPV sped along Route 76. Lu Cheng's suggestion for a retreat was that the situation in Dika was chaotic and easy to intercept. Why not go south to Bori town and head to the port city of Fartuat? To this, Wang Dong and Cirrus both agreed. As the car sped past, the silent desert beside the road suddenly moved, forming a human-shaped sand sculpture. The sand sculpture shook, and the sand on the surface fell off, revealing the mummy with his face covered in bandages and a pair of deep, flickering eyes. He sprinted at full speed and finally caught up with his target. As for the priests, he didn't want them to be a hindrance, thinking that they would slow him down, so he didn't bring them along. Looking at the taillights of the car, the mummy's bandages moved, revealing an undetectable smile. "Humph," he said softly, then sank back into the yellow sand. In the MPV, Cirrus couldn't help but praise after hearing what Lu Cheng had done. "Not bad. This will make the people of the deity temple think that the opponent isn't strong, so the number of experts they send to chase after us will be limited." "I hope so. If the priests had swarmed me, I would have had no choice but to run." "Mr. Cirrus, how's your recovery?" asked Lu Cheng with concern. "Once I stop injecting for more than an hour, the medicine won't be able to suppress me anymore." Cirrus flexed his arms and smiled happily. "I'm halfway recovered." Lu Cheng was about to speak again when he felt a premonition. He turned to look out of the window. The gentle and peaceful yellow sand under the moonlight had turned violent. It was dyed black and was surging towards them grain by grain. "No, that's not yellow sand. Those are tiny insects that completely covered the color of the yellow sand. They were densely packed and uncountable, making one's scalp tingle." "Ouch." Cirrus's grandson saw this and let out a tragic cry. Lu Cheng made a prompt decision and opened the door forcefully. He jumped out of the car, knelt on one knee, and punched the ground. Bam! Just as his fist hit the ground, rings of scarlet and white flames rippled outwards. With the support of heaven and earth, the power extended. The flames rippled and passed through the car, engulfing the black waves. Pa, 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 pa. Whenever the scarlet and white flames came into contact, the tiny insects would immediately explode. They didn't leave behind any corpses, as though they had returned directly to the underworld. Rings after rings, waves after waves. With Lu Cheng as the center, within a radius of 50 to 60 meters, the black turned into powder. The ground was clean, revealing the yellow sand. After the punch, Lu Cheng visualized and adjusted his organs. He aimed another punch at the opposite side. This time, he treated the ground as his opponent and used internal explosion. Internal explosion of the physical invulnerability level. Rumble. The surface of the ground exploded, causing the surroundings to shake. Not far from Lu Cheng, a black figure felt the pressure and uncontrollably crawled out from the yellow sand. A yellowish-white bandage covered his face, making him look demonic and evil. The mummy narrowed his eyes and almost blurted out, "Demigod! A physical invulnerability expert from China." Chapter 604. In that instant, what he had seen in the video, what he had seen at the scene, and the reality before his eyes flashed across the mummy's mind. He was certain that he had fallen into a well-designed trap. He was best at mental attacks. Against the Chinese Inhumans who had yet to undergo qualitative changes, he had an overwhelming advantage. Even if he was pincered by 2 or 3 of them, he was confident of winning quickly. However, once he encountered a demigod, even if his opponent's level hadn't stabilized, the effects would be greatly reduced. He might be able to win in the end, but it would definitely be a tough battle. And in a tough battle, his opponent would have the advantage in numbers. If Cirrus or his companions displayed decent strength, the outcome would be rather dangerous. Besides, the The mummy had expended a lot of energy chasing after him. Even if he fought alone, he might not be able to win against the enemy who was resting in the car. More importantly, who knew if there were other demigods? Retreat. I have to retreat. I have to retreat as soon as possible. With a quick thought, the mummy made up his mind. However, in a battle of the same level, it would be more dangerous to retreat without a care. It was equivalent to leaving the clash of auras and the space behind him to the enemy. If he wanted to retreat, he had to advance first. He had to break the enemy's momentum and create an opportunity. In a flash, the mummy covered a distance of more than 20 meters and threw a punch at Lu Cheng's face. Behind him, there were remnants of images, some fading slowly, some appearing clearly. They overlapped one another, forming a long tape of negatives. These images were like the wake of a jet, pushing one another forward. In the end, they gave the mummy the momentum to charge forward. In the blink of an eye, he had closed in on his opponent. The aura of the Mansion of the Dead enveloped him in an attempt to intimidate him. His fist was also reflected in Lu Cheng's starry eyes. The mummy's fist was wrapped in white bandages. Corpse oil seeped out from the inside, dyeing it a disgusting yellowish-brown color. A nauseating and dizzying stench filled the air. Whoosh! A gust of wind blew around him. Black gas gathered and turned into tiny worms. As the mummy's fist struck, they drilled into various parts of Lu Cheng's body, especially his eyes, nostrils, ears, temples, and other areas. The black scripture of the undead and the fist of the dead were both poisonous and strange. Lu Cheng seemed to have been shaken by the terrifying and eerie pressure of the Mansion of the Dead. His reaction was delayed by half a beat. He only regained his senses when the fist was about to hit him and the black worm drilled into his body. He hurriedly raised his right arm to block in front of him. Bang! As soon as the mummy's fist touched his sleeve, his arm moved back at the same speed as the mummy's. He did not bear too much force, as if they had agreed to do such a difficult performance in advance. As Lu Cheng retracted his arm, his qi, blood, spirit, force, and even the black worm that had entered his body collapsed into his dantian. Inside the vast starry sky, under the control of his will and the guidance of his mind, which were many times more powerful than before, dazzling lights flashed and formed the ancient word, fighting, that would never admit defeat. Zzzzzzzzzzzzz. In that instant, the rest of the black worms seemed to have drilled into the lifeless body of a dead person. Having lost their target, they could only scatter helplessly. The former was compressed by the millstone and melted like snow when it was burned by the fire force. Just as Lu Cheng's arm was about to hit his chest, the muscles on his arm suddenly bulged and thickened by more than 3 times. Bruises appeared on his arm as his large tendons protruded, filled with pure strength. Boom! Lu Cheng bent his elbow and swung his arm back, colliding head-on with the mummy's fist, which had lost its momentum. Due to the distortion of his muscles and fascia, an explosive sound rang out. The yellowish-brown bandage trembled slightly. The mummy seemed to have heard the strange sound of his own bones. He quickly moved his shoulder and used the force to pull back his fist. He floated back more than 10 meters, like a kite that had its string cut and regained its freedom. Lu Cheng took a step forward with his right foot and shifted his body horizontally. As he retracted and released his dantian force, his left fist was covered in thick and heavy white flames. He struck the air between the two of them. Whoosh! The air within a radius of more than 10 meters was ignited, turning into countless flame fairies. Summoned by Lu Cheng's fist, they pounced on the mummy from all directions. Moths. Fire Sex 116th style. Moths. After making the great leap and connecting heaven and earth, Lu Cheng didn't need to do any prelude and could use it directly. As long as it was something evil, there was no mistake in using fire. In the mummy's eyes, the densely packed moths were pouncing on him with no regard for their own safety. The high temperature curled up the frayed edges of his clothes. The yellowish-white bandage also became moist, as though some kind of oil was melting. Anger flashed in his eyes. He raised both his arms and let out a terrifying roar. Black smoke rose, and a dark hurricane suddenly appeared around the mummy. It connected to the top and spun wildly, expanding in all directions and swallowing all the moths. In the distance, Wang Dong and Cirrus, who were about to get out of the car to help, felt dizzy. It was as though they had seen a wolf-headed grim reaper with a giant scythe. Their minds went blank and they stood rooted to the ground, almost driving the MPV off the road. Dark Scripture of the Dead, Anubis's Call. Lu Cheng quickly outlined the forwarding formula in his mind and suppressed all his fear. His right fist condensed a blazing white fireball with hints of purple. He threw it at the mummy in the middle of the hurricane. Fire Sex 36 style. Devour. At this moment, the mummy suddenly stomped forward. It seemed like he was exerting force, but he landed silently on the surface of the road. Whoosh! The sound of the wind intensified to the extreme. The dark hurricane collapsed and enveloped Lu Cheng. At the same time, the yellow sand at the edge of the desert turned into hidden weapons that whizzed towards Lu Cheng. They were denser and more dangerous than the moths. Dark Scripture of the Dead. Sandstorm. Boom. The fireball, which had been condensed to the maximum, exploded. A blazing white light flashed past, almost blinding the mummy's eyes. The subsequent shockwave swept away a lot of sand and crashed into the mummy's body. Within the shockwave, the red light surged and swallowed everything. The mummy closed his eyes and raised his arms to block in front of his body. A dim light shone. As the shockwave came crashing, he retreated and used the momentum to turn around. In an instant, he had entered the desert and was running towards Kukhang in the north. This was the first time Lu Cheng encountered such a decisive mighty one. He couldn't help but reflect on his choice of moves. As thoughts flashed through his mind, he was already chasing after the mummy in the remaining sand. He couldn't let the mummy escape so easily. If he returned to Kukhang and called for help, with his tracking ability, things would become very troublesome. Even though it was difficult to kill a physical invulnerability expert, and he might not be able to stop this mighty one dressed as a mummy, he had to chase him in another direction and buy enough time for Cirrus and his family to evacuate. Bam bam bam. Lu Cheng moved forward. Between turns, he stepped forward with the walk of you. Strong winds blew, blowing the sand away. Thump, thump, thump. With large strides, he cut through the yellow sand and chased after the mummy. With one fleeing and one chasing, the two quickly disappeared from the eyes of Wang Dong and Cirrus, leaving behind a long yellow sand dragon that hadn't settled down yet. Let's go! Wang Dong was experienced. He understood Lu Cheng's intentions in an instant. He decisively started the MPV and drove as fast as he could. Aren't we going to help? Cirrus was stunned. No, we might not be able to catch up. Even if we could, we might not be able to stop that physical invulnerability expert. Demigod. If we keep pestering him like this, we won't be able to leave when his helpers arrive. Wang Dong explained as he drove. Lu Cheng is alone. He can fight and leave as he pleases. This makes him more agile and safer. We need to reach Fartuat as soon as possible and leave Nile. This is the biggest help we can give him. Cirrus was also a person who had seen blood on the tip of his blade. After some thought, he understood the crux of the matter and didn't say anything else. Two sandstorm dragons appeared in the desert. The distance between the head and tail increased and decreased at times. With a turn, they went around a sand dune. Lu Cheng saw the bright moon and quiet sand. There was no trace of the mummy. A thought flashed through his mind. He expanded the range of the ice mirror. It was as though he could hear the subtle movements of insects in the depths of the yellow sand. The gentle undulations under his feet disappeared in an instant. Lu Cheng's eyes shone. He retracted his chi and force and brought out the human body Big Dan that looked like a miniature universe. This time, he didn't need to rely on external forces. Using his own willpower and spirit, he gathered the stars and created the absolute darkness and coldness at the edge of the universe. Bam! Lu Cheng stepped out with his right foot and stomped down, sinking into the yellow sand. In an instant, with his feet as the center, the sand froze. Crystals appeared and spread in all directions, drilling deeper. Self-created unique skill, Lament of the Ice Queen, complete version. Crack! More than 10 meters away, the yellow sand and ice crumbled, turning into bullets that shot towards Lu Cheng. They covered the sky and covered the earth. The mummy leaped out and fled again. With a swallowing punch, Lu Cheng dispersed the hidden weapons and continued his pursuit. 3 hours later, at the edge of the desert outside Kukhang City, he stopped at the same spot, frowning slightly. He had completely lost track of the mummy. A physical invulnerability mighty one sure isn't easy to kill. Lu Cheng's thoughts turned into a sigh. Along the way, he had blocked the mummy's path and occasionally exchanged blows. He had forced the mummy to change directions more than a dozen times. It took him a long time to return to Kukhang. At this time, as long as Wang Dong and the rest hadn't gotten into a car accident, they should be near Fartuat. Even if the mummy found help and crossed the desert, it would be too late to stop them. Once they arrived, the military would arrange for them to leave the port on a night boat and bid farewell to Nile. Of course, since this arrangement wasn't communicated beforehand, it might take some time. That would be the chance for the mummy and his help. I'll hide in the east of Kukhang City. If the mummy really does find help and cross the desert to Fartuat, I'll harass them along the way and try my best to buy time. Lu Cheng quickly made up his mind. He circled to the east of the city, adjusted his breathing, and circulated his ice force. Following the train of thought of the cultivation techniques, he hid his presence and blended into the darkness. He rested and recovered while monitoring the edge of the desert. Back then, Gu Hui could even fool his sense of danger. After obtaining the complete set of cultivation techniques, Lu Cheng studied the content diligently and turned it into his own use. In a building near the military base, Constantine held a glass of red wine and looked at the disheveled mummy in astonishment. He said in amusement, "That's right. You met a giant reptile? Lu Cheng from China." "He has become a demigod, although it's not stable yet," replied the mummy gloomily. Fortunately, his face was bandaged. Otherwise, Constantine would have seen his face turn red from embarrassment and anger. In the 3-hour tug of war, he had exhausted a lot of energy and almost died at Lu Cheng's hands. If Kukhang had been a few dozen kilometers away, he probably wouldn't have made it back. "Lu Cheng is at the Terrorgrade too?" Constantine's eyes lit up. "Are you interested?" asked the mummy sharply. Constantine took a sip of red wine and laughed maniacally. "Of course. I've wanted his ability to foresee danger for a long time. If it weren't for Ji and Shi from China informing the great teacher in Kontsev, I would have used his girlfriend to make a move. All right, I'll admit it. When I first noticed him, he was already a little stronger than me. As for now, I believe the taste of his blood will be even better." "Both of you are at the Terrorgrade." "Both of you have just reached the Terrorgrade," reminded the mummy coldly. "You might not be able to defeat him." Constantine wasn't annoyed. Instead, he laughed and spread his arms. "The blood of the Savior flows in my body. There's already a qualitative difference between us." The mummy was about to say something when he sensed something. "Our helper is here. P.S. When I went to the hospital previously, the doctor suggested I get in 4 drip. I was a little hesitant at the time because I felt it wasn't good for my body. Then, I continued to take medicine and apply it. Today, I'm obviously getting better. Although it's still growing, it's not much longer. The more serious areas have also improved. I'll go for a follow-up tomorrow and see what the doctor says. If it's quick, I'll be back to normal the day after tomorrow." Chapter 605. Helper? Hearing the mummy's affirmation, Constantine was stunned for a moment because he did not notice any powerhouses approaching. In this aspect, he was sure that he was much stronger than the mummy. How could he not notice anything when the mummy spoke first? Could it be that the person who came was strong enough to hide from his senses and used a special method to inform the mummy? Seeing the doubt in Constantine's eyes, the mummy's facial muscles pulled at the bandages and opened his mouth. "Listen carefully. Listen." Constantine closed his eyes and tilted his head slightly, focusing on listening to the movement outside. However, there was still no Terrorgrade movement. Instead, there was the roar of motors, the rotation of tracks, and orderly footsteps in the distance. There was a lot of it, but it was orderly. "An army?" Constantine opened his eyes and a red light flashed. "The 35th Nile Fully Mechanized Division." The mummy gave an affirmative answer. "One of the 5 trump card armies that are most loyal to the pharaoh. They should have built a wartime airport in the wild. Their commander, Lieutenant General Amon, is also a demigod, the Terrorgrade you mentioned." Constantine took a sip of red wine and asked in confusion, "Isn't this a secret operation? Why do we have to join the army? Do you want me to not be able to return to America?" "Satha lives in the base. There are many generals of the Brotherhood there, many armies, various high-tech equipment, and many powerful weapons. If we encounter them in the wild and are not trapped in a fixed place, we don't have to be too afraid. However, if we want to sneak into the base or even attack it directly, the two of us will only lose our lives. Even with Amon's help, the outcome will not change. The best way to deal with a military fortress is to send a fully armed army and bomb it with fighter jets, the mummy explained in a low voice. After that, he added, Sotha has already noticed the pharaoh's intentions and will definitely respond. This matter cannot be delayed any longer. After all, there is only one place left. When the situation stabilizes and the pharaoh returns, the international community can say whatever they want. At most, we will just throw a few scapegoats. All right. Constantine turned around and walked to the window. Through the thin curtains, he looked down at the street below. He saw armored vehicles, main battle tanks, and rocket launchers moving at a steady speed toward the military base not far away. A war was about to break out. The sound of footsteps echoed throughout the building as if announcing the arrival of a powerhouse. Dong dong dong. In less than a minute, someone knocked on the door. The rhythm was slow and extremely polite. General Amon, please come in, the mummy said politely. With a creak, the door was pushed open, revealing a man in a brownish-green military uniform. He had black hair that reached his ears, and his blue eyes were like gems formed from the sea. His facial features were well-defined, and he could be called a handsome man in the Nile style. Through his own channels, Sotha informed various countries that he accused the pharaoh of staging a coup and slaughtering dissidents. He requested the international community to send an observation team to investigate. He claimed to have accurate and conclusive evidence. Lieutenant General Amon glanced at Constantine and said in a deep voice, "We don't have much time left." Following his words, several formations of bombers, under the cover of fighter jets, flew past the window and swept toward the military base. Rumble! 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 Lu Cheng, who was hiding in the east, heard the continuous explosions and felt the earth tremble slightly. Slightly stunned, he left his hiding spot and went up to the top floor of a tall building. Looking at the direction of the commotion, he saw flames rising from the military base. In the end, the flames didn't go out for a long time. In the air, there was the sound of airplanes flying at low altitudes. The rebels and the regular army are exchanging fire again? It looks intense. Lu Cheng didn't have any information to back it up, so he could only make a guess based on his impression. However, there was one thing he was sure of. The mummy from before probably didn't have the time to find reinforcements to chase after Fartuat. In other words, Cyrus and his family were completely safe. Should I take this opportunity to find a physical invulnerability expert to practice, or should I leave Kukhang and look for another opportunity in Dika? In a battlefield where airplanes are deployed, it's very easy for them to get hurt by accident and interfere. Lu Cheng muttered to himself thoughtfully. For a moment, he was a little hesitant. Just as he reached the bottom of the building with his hand, he suddenly noticed a long trail of yellow sand in the desert east of Kukhang. A figure was approaching at high speed. Another physical invulnerability expert? Seems like it's still a little lacking. It's similar to me. Lu Cheng made a sharp judgment. Silently traversing through the darkness where all the streetlights were out, he arrived at the location where the figure was supposed to enter Kukhang. A strong gust of wind blew, and a figure was rapidly approaching. Lu Cheng was shocked when he saw who it was. It was Ren Li. Morning Star Ren Li. Why did she come here? Lu Cheng quickly removed the concealment of his aura, stepped out of the corner, and revealed himself. Ren Li slowed down, frowned, and spoke first. Why are you here? She was wearing a light green martial arts suit, carrying a weapon wrapped in a brass scabbard. Her straight hair was tied into a ponytail, and her doll-like face didn't show any signs of dust. Her big, bright eyes were full of vigor, as bright as the morning stars. Lu Cheng thought for a few seconds before asking in a serious and tactful manner, "Where do you think this is?" "Isn't this Dika?" Ren Li was experienced and asked immediately. "I knew it." Lu Cheng almost covered his face and sighed. He answered honestly, "This is Kukhang." "Kukhang? Which country is Kukhang from?" Ren Li asked guiltily. "It's also from Nile, but it's 300 kilometers south of Dika," Lu Cheng explained patiently. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. How thick-skinned must the elders of Kongtong School be to allow such a person to train in the war-torn zones? Aren't they afraid that she'll find the headquarters of a strong enemy? Renly came to a realization and said confidently, "They didn't warn me." "They?" Lu Cheng looked left and right. Renly explained a little embarrassedly, "I have a GPS device and a satellite phone on me. If I go the wrong way, they'll call to correct me." "Not really. Look, you just have to take a turn and keep going straight, and you'll be in Dika," Lu Cheng said perfunctorily. "Theoretically speaking, this sentence is true everywhere." "I see. So I didn't lose myself," Renly whispered happily and proudly, increasing her confidence. She looked Lu Cheng up and down, then smiled and said, "I heard from Priest that you just made a breakthrough." "That's great." "So did I. However, I was delayed for a day and took a detour for another day. I didn't meet Priest at Fartuat, so I had to meet him at Dika. Based on the way you're going, you might not meet him at Dika." Lu Cheng was about to speak when another explosion sounded from the military base in the distance. Wave after wave, they almost merged into one. In the blink of an eye, they converged into a violent commotion, making the entire city feel like it was quaking. Was the ammunition depot blown up? While Lu Cheng was guessing, Renli's eyes lit up. "Is there a battle over there? It sounds intense." "Yes." Lu Cheng didn't hide it. "Let's go take a look, observe, and learn," Renli suggested excitedly. "If we meet a lone physical invulnerability expert, I'll let you have a go first." She makes it sound like a child giving a pear. Lu Cheng already had such thoughts. Without hesitation, he said decisively, "Okay. But you mustn't be reckless and provoke." Don't be reckless." He swallowed the words provoke back into his stomach. "Don't worry, I'm very experienced," Renli said sincerely. "I'm a martial artist who has been honed in the war-torn zones for a long time." Lu Cheng kept his words and rushed towards the military base before Renli, who was leading the way confidently. They restrained their speed and diverted some of their energy to be on guard against their surroundings. At the same time, they concealed their movements and almost blended into the darkness like ghosts. As they neared the battlefield, they found a tall building nearby. Through the shattered outer layer of the building, they either pushed, swayed, or jumped. In less than 20 seconds, they climbed to the rooftop and looked at the military base from afar. Flames and smoke filled his eyes. The sound of cannons and gunshots rang in his ears. Everything was like a scene from a blockbuster movie. For a moment, Lu Cheng was a little dazed. At this moment, he saw from the corner of his eye that, not far from the base, there was a similar scene of light, explosions, and exaggerated collisions. More importantly, the surface of the buildings there was weathering. The wind was strong, and there was rain of fire and black fog in the air. A battle between physical invulnerability experts. Renli wrinkled her nose. She had also noticed the situation there. Her eyes lit up. Without waiting for her suggestion, Lu Cheng said, "Let's go take a look first. Be careful and don't get discovered." "Okay." Renli carried her sword and rushed to the edge of the rooftop. Then, she leaped into the air and jumped to the roof of a shorter building dozens of meters away. As though she was riding the wind, her speed was extremely fast. She landed quietly and stood steadily. Lu Cheng knew that he didn't have the ability to lift something heavy as though it was light. After all, everyone had their own strengths. Thus, he decided to withdraw his qi and blood while running. As his Dan force exploded, his legs swelled, and the edge of the rooftop collapsed with a bang. He successfully jumped to Renli's side. The two of them shuttled through the urban jungle and soon approached the battlefield of physical invulnerability experts. They looked down from a tall building that had peeled off its surface. At this moment, Lu Cheng was using the art of concealment of qi and spirit. His gaze was indistinct and didn't disturb the battle below. Renli also used the unique skills of Kong Tong School. A strong gust of wind blew past her and covered her movements. At a glance, Lu Cheng saw a familiar face. It was the expert dressed like a mummy who was chasing after Cirrus and his family. Satha didn't expect the pharaoh to be so decisive as to mobilize his ace division to attack his base. When the situation was in chaos and his army was on the verge of collapse, he led a few leaders of the Brotherhood and secretly escaped from the fortress in an attempt to escape. Who knew that with the combination of Constantine's supersenses in the dark and the mummy's ability to sense living things, they were quickly discovered. They were ambushed and lost 2 leaders in an instant. Now, Satha was facing off against Constantine and Lieutenant General Aman alone. While he was in danger, He was constantly looking for an opportunity to escape. He knew that once the mummy finished off the remaining 2 leaders, he wouldn't be able to escape even if he wanted to. Sigh, I can't fall sick no matter what. However, I've been taking medicine for a few days now and my mental state is still a little weak. Let me have a good rest tomorrow night. I'll officially return to the second watch the day after tomorrow. It'll still be the same old time. Chapter 606. Compared to the young Aman and the newly promoted Constantine, Sotha was definitely a veteran physical invulnerability mighty one. If he were in China, even if he didn't get a title, he would definitely be rated as a first pin expert. As he dodged and dodged, he didn't show any signs of losing, but he was still at a disadvantage. His fists were spewing fire, which disturbed the surroundings. Even the environment was affected. Crimson rain fell from the sky like stars. While it was interfering with his opponent's movement, 6 symmetrical wings quickly condensed on his back. The burning and steaming wings made him look like an angel walking on the earth. After the 6 wings were completed, Sotha made a prompt decision. He straightened his back and turned the crimson feathers into arrows that whizzed towards Constantine and Aman. These arrows glowed with flames. Once they came into contact, they would immediately explode with continuous rumbles. It was as if dozens or hundreds of RPGs had been fired at the same time. Of course, the individual arrows weren't as powerful because they were scattered, but it was still a spectacular sight. Sotha's trump card, Fury of the Fire Angel. Rumble! 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 Streaks of light flew everywhere, and the crimson flames spread like waves. Neither Aman nor Constantine dared to face this attack head-on. They each took a few steps back, dodging and blocking. Now's the time. Sotha stomped on the ground, cracking the cement road. His entire body was like a phantom, dragging a long tail behind him as he sped into the distance. Suddenly, a dim light flashed, and a crimson light appeared. Constantine's figure had caught up to Sotha in the blink of an eye. His full speed and short-distance sprinting speed were like man-made lightning, much faster than this veteran demigod. At this moment, Sotha stopped without warning. His feet stepped onto the road as if he had never run before. Pa, pa, pa. With a leap, the surface of his fist was ignited. A blazing white light clung to it as if it was enveloping and covering it. In the midst of the clash, Constantine didn't have time to do anything else. He reached out his right palm, opened his glowing fingers, and grabbed his enemy's fist. Boom! The blazing white light on Sotha's fist exploded in advance, pushing his wrist to change direction. Using a strange trajectory, he avoided Constantine's grab and hit his opponent's abdomen. His escape just now was not a real escape, but a counterattack. He had already noticed Constantine's terrifying speed. He knew that if he kept running, he would be caught sooner or later. When Aman and the mummy surrounded him, everything would be over. If he wanted to escape, he had to attack first. First, he had to severely wound Dark Knight Bat and destroy his ability to catch up. For this reason, Sotha did not hesitate to use the old man's assassination technique. In a short moment, this veteran demigod demonstrated his wisdom, perseverance, decisiveness, and strength. No physical invulnerability expert came for free. Bang! Blood and flesh exploded, and his intestines writhed like snakes. Constantine looked at the exaggerated wound on his lower abdomen in disbelief. Sotha, on the other hand, did not even look at him. His body bounced back, and his right leg tightened into an iron rod, and he whipped it between the enemy's legs. If this kick connected, he would borrow the force to run forward and truly escape. Poof! Sotha's right leg missed. Just as his heart tightened, a milky white light exploded in front of him. It was so blinding that he couldn't open his eyes. In his senses, the rain of fire around him seemed to have been doused with dust or ice water, extinguishing with a sizzling sound. Not good. Sotha muttered to himself. Before he could retract his right leg, blazing white flame spurted out of his left leg and slammed it into the ground. Using the force, he charged forward and leaped into the distance. A figure appeared in a flash. Constantine had blocked his way. The clearly visible ruptured intestines in his abdomen wriggled and connected on their own, healing at a speed visible to the naked eye. The flesh and blood on the exaggerated wound were also growing and gathering crazily. It seemed that in a few seconds, Everything would be restored to its original state, except for his clothes. "How dare you hurt the savior?" Constantine's sharp and angry voice reverberated in the surroundings. His swollen palm drilled into Sothra's ears. In Sothra's eyes, Constantine's entire body was emitting a milky white holy light. It was a stark contrast to his dark and sinister appearance. The natural pity in his eyes had already turned into mockery. "Damn it!" Sotha cursed in his heart. He didn't dare hold back. All the pores on his right arm opened up and spurted out blazing white and blue flames. He used the flames to propel his fist forward with terrifying speed and strength towards his enemy. At the same time, the surrounding environment was affected and ignited, forming a net of fire. The net of fire rapidly shrunk, condensing into a violent ball of fire the size of a palm. It crashed towards Constantine from the side. Constantine didn't care about the ball of fire. He extended his hand and clenched his fist. Drops of blood seeped out from his pores as if they were alive. They turned into a sinister glove and blocked Sothra's fist. Boom! The flames dimmed and scattered. Constantine was forced to take a few steps back. His shoulder was also hit by the violent ball of fire, turning it into a bloody mess. Sotha stood firm. He wanted to seize the opportunity to strike again and complete his objective. However, he suddenly felt an invisible force pushing at him from the void. He couldn't help but take a few steps back. Around his shoulder, a strange airflow exploded, tearing apart his general's clothes and damaging his skin, muscles, and fascia. What's going on? This was the first time Sotha had encountered such a strange thing. He was both shocked and frightened. There will be retribution for all who hurt. Constantine's sharp voice sounded again. He extended his body again and tangled with Sotha. However, the milky white light around him had dimmed significantly. At this moment, Amon caught up. Sotha had no choice but to give up on escaping. He struggled to hold on under the pincer attack of the two demigods. On the rooftop of the tall building, Ren Li's eyes lit up. Her right hand was already on the hilt of her sword. She looked eager to try. 3-on-3. She turned to Lu Cheng and suggested in a low voice. Lu Cheng thought for a moment, then shook his head solemnly. "Forget it next time. That should be Dark Knight Bat. He's an American. If we can't finish him off here, I'm afraid he'll find trouble with my girlfriend when he returns to China. Besides, we don't have any grudges with him. I'm not against sparring with him. However, I don't think I can get past myself if I really want to kill him. Yeah, it's hard to tell who's good and who's bad in Niall's case. If a physical invulnerability expert were to form an irreconcilable grudge, it would be a huge headache. As long as a physical invulnerability expert was willing to go all out, it would be easy for them to kill a few people who didn't know any martial arts, even in China where there were strict regulations. The worst-case scenario was that they wouldn't be able to escape and would have to pay with their life. Lu Cheng stopped the mummy from killing Sirius. Since they were both doing business, the aftermath wouldn't implicate too many people. If there was a grudge that the mummy was willing to take a huge risk for revenge, he wouldn't just have to worry about Yen Zheka, who was in America. He would also have to worry about his parents, relatives, and friends. He couldn't possibly watch over them all the time or provide a head of state-level security. Of course, the opposite was also true. The mummy would also consider these issues before dealing with Lu Cheng. Ren Li was silent for a few seconds. Pursing her lips, she nodded. All right. She looked at the battlefield longingly. Then let's watch a little longer. Sure. Lu Cheng agreed readily. At the climax of the battle, seeing that the mummy only had one opponent left, Sotha, who was in a passive position, was furious. His eyebrows were raised. Let's die together. He roared. It was as though something in his body had been ignited. Rumble. At the spot where the three of them were fighting, a huge fireball rose and expanded, turning into a mushroom-shaped cloud. The surrounding noise disappeared. It was both loud and silent. Sacrificing oneself and perishing together. Rumble. The sound overlapped. The building shook. Some of the walls cracked. Some of the ceiling even fell. Did Sotha use his killer move? Lu Cheng and Ren Li looked at each other. Two figures flew out from the edge of the fireball. One was Constantine, and the other was Amon. Both of them were covered in dirt and were heavily injured. Scorch marks and potholes could be seen all over their bodies. Even their arms were dangling abnormally. Even Constantine's terrifying self-healing ability couldn't heal him in a short time. The milky white glow around him had dissipated. At this moment, another figure leaped out from the fireball and fled into the distance. It was General Sotha. His body was charred black and stained with blood. He didn't look human anymore. He had controlled the power of his sacrifice and only used half of it. That way, he would only be heavily injured but not killed. Seizing the opportunity when Constantine and Amon thought that he had completely self-destructed and when the other two were injured, he broke out of the encirclement and ran into the distance. He was a cunning old fox. Tap, tap, tap. He ran as fast as he could, paying no attention to his ridiculous injuries. Suddenly, a hand wrapped in a yellowish-white bandage reached out from the ground and grabbed his left ankle. Following that, a similar hand reached out and clamped down on Sotha's right foot like a pincer. The mummy had killed the last opponent and caught up in time. Under normal circumstances, with his speed and the resistance of the ground, he wouldn't have been able to catch up to Sotha. But now, his opponent was heavily injured and weakened in all aspects. He couldn't pull away. Sotha tried to pull his feet, but his opponent didn't move at all, as though he was made of iron. Seeing Constantine closing in at high speed, his breath audible, he finally gave up. He closed his eyes, looked to the sky, and yelled the holy name. Then he burst into flames. Boom! The explosion was even more terrifying than the previous one. Sotha's body was smashed into pieces on the spot. His fingers and flesh splattered and fell far away. The mummy right below him was almost buried with him. All the bandages were burnt to ashes, revealing the charred skin. 4 fingers were missing from his palm, and the bones in both arms were completely shattered. Constantine suffered another blow. His clothes were in tatters, and only a third of his hair was left. He was in such a sorry state that he didn't look elegant at all, as expected of General Sotha. Amon panted and observed his surroundings. The 3 demigods almost couldn't stop him. Amon, who was the least injured, still had troops to command. Thinking of Constantine's amazing recovery ability, he didn't mind bidding farewell and ran to the military base. The mummy dug into the ground and limped towards the nearest skyscraper. Constantine strolled beside him. Stretching his neck, he grumbled, "This fag should have dealt with such a dangerous guy personally." "Don't worry. The fags will deal with the last target," the mummy replied, panting. Lu Cheng and Ren Li retracted their gazes and squatted down. With their backs against the rooftop, they relied on their enhanced senses and corresponding techniques to eavesdrop on the conversation between the mummy and Dark Knight Bat. This skyscraper only had 12 floors. Very good. Constantine rubbed his temples. I need to recuperate. As a dead, the mummy's injuries didn't affect his speech. He asked casually, didn't you want to deal with Lu and Pang and suck their blood? Constantine's blood-sucking wasn't just a simple act of sucking. The feelings of the target before their death could help him obtain the corresponding abilities. Otherwise, with just the blood, the chances of him failing were very high. Even if he succeeded, he might not have gained much. As for the remnant blood in the Holy Grail, if it wasn't for the fact that the Savior had paved his own path and became a taboo figure in the early days without any prior explorations and accumulations, the mark he left behind would have been too strong. Even after 2,000 years, Constantine probably wouldn't have succeeded. Even so, his harvest was much worse than expected. Hearing the mummy's question, Constantine smiled. There are still many opportunities to deal with them, so there's no need to rush. For example, Lu's girlfriend is in Connecticut. He visits often, so I don't have to worry about missing out. His girlfriend is the granddaughter of 2 terror-grade experts. I can drink her blood while I'm at it. Aren't you afraid of revenge? Asked the mummy, stunned. It's better if my family and friends are dead, answered Constantine indifferently. On the rooftop, Renly suddenly sensed that Lu Cheng's aura had sharpened. Her eyes lit up. She clenched her fist and transmitted her voice. Attack! Yeah. Lu Cheng narrowed his eyes. He had made up his mind to kill Dark Knight Bat, even if he had to chase him to the ends of the earth. Are we going to deal with one each? Asked Renly through voice transmission. Lu Cheng thought for a moment, then shook his head. The mummy is heavily injured. Let's take him by surprise and kill him together. That way the follow-up would be easy. P.S. Back to normal tomorrow. Make up for missed updates on Sunday. Chapter 607. After a brief discussion, Renly decided to remain on the rooftop while Lu Chang walked to the other side. With a push of his hand, he leaped out and landed accurately and lightly on the protrusion of the 10th floor. There was almost no sound, and the constant gunshots from the military base completely drowned out all movement. Just like that, he leaped down from the outer layer of the building like an agile monkey. After a few seconds, he landed firmly on the ground. Restraining his breath, sealing his body with ice, and cutting off his scent, Lu Cheng activated the cultivation method of concealment. He circled around the building and snuck to the front. Finally, with his back against the wall, he hid in a corner and waited for the mummy and Constantine to pass by. Throughout the entire process, the expression in his eyes was heavy, like a frozen lake, both calm and cold. 10 steps, 9 steps, 8 steps. While Lu Cheng was silently counting down, Constantine suddenly paused. He cleared his throat and said in a slightly shrill voice, "Sothoa's suicide wouldn't have evaporated completely. There should be some blood and flesh left." "What are you trying to say?" asked the mummy in a deep voice as he slowly repaired his comminuted arm. "My reward was Sothoa's blood." Who knew he would choose the most extreme and violent method of resistance? Constantine shrugged. "I have to find the remaining parts of his body and suck out the remaining blood. It's better than nothing." The mummy thought for a few seconds and nodded reluctantly. "Then hurry up. I have to enter the sarcophagus to recover immediately." "No problem. I'm very sensitive to the smell of blood." Constantine chuckled and returned to the spot where Sotha had sacrificed himself. As he walked, he narrowed his eyes and twitched his nose imperceptibly, trying to discern the faint smell of gunpowder. Lu Cheng stopped his silent count. He arched his back slightly and bent his knees slightly, ready to strike. "Here," muttered Constantine in a low voice. He walked to the edge of the violent explosion and picked up half of a finger on the opposite side of the road. The severed part was charred black. This was one of the few traces of Sotha left in this world. Constantine pinched his finger. The skin on the severed part of the body cracked open, and the little remaining blood flowed out. After smelling it with intoxication, Constantine stuffed the severed finger into his mouth like he was sucking on a popsicle. Even though the mummy often saw organs dug out, he couldn't help but feel nauseous. Now was the time. Lu Cheng gathered his qi and blood and exploded it immediately. He straightened his legs and back and stamped his feet heavily. His whole body left behind afterimages as he dashed madly towards the mummy with the shrinking distance technique. Visualization appeared in his mind, but it didn't affect his speed. The mummy's heart clenched as he sensed something. However, before he could do anything else, the attacker had already rushed in front of him and occupied his entire field of vision. Lu Cheng! The sense of danger turned into a cold current, bursting out from the mummy's spine. Both of his arms were fractured, and he could no longer exert any strength. He had no choice but to make a prompt decision and lift up his right calf, fiercely kicking on the spot. Pa! The air cracked open and the dim light turned into a blade. The blade kick fiercely chopped at Lu Cheng, accompanied by a lot of black gas. In the face of such an attack, Lu Cheng didn't care. He simply tilted his body to avoid being hit. Crack! The blade of the kick hit the ice armor on his ribs, shattering it and causing cold rain to fall. Lu Cheng felt pain in his muscles and bones, and his killing intent intensified. He swung his right arm behind his back and threw a punch at the mummy's chest as the surrounding temperature dropped rapidly. A kick for a punch. His punch didn't seem to have hit flesh and blood. Instead, it sank into rotting wood. However, the power that froze his thoughts and froze his organs spread. Severe warning. The mummy's chest split open, and his heart turned black. His eyes lost focus for a moment, as though he had returned to his usual slumber. However, as a dead, he had a strong resistance against freezing, petrification, and hibernation powers. He didn't lose his instincts and didn't need to think. He followed Lu Cheng's punch and swung backwards to create a distance. He didn't give Lu Cheng a chance to follow up with a combo attack. Constantine also reacted. Holding Sothoa's finger in his mouth, he turned around and pounced. His cape fluttered like a huge bat's wings. At this moment, a bright light appeared, dispelling the surrounding darkness. On the rooftop of the skyscraper, A clear ray of sword radiance descended. The green sword radiance spun at high speed, forming a violent tornado. From top to bottom, it enveloped the sluggish mummy. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The skyscraper became even more mottled. The sword radiance and tornado arrived in a flash. As long as the enemy was enveloped, they would be sliced into countless small pieces. The 12th style of the Wind Sect, Heaven's Burial. The sword intent pierced through the mummy's brain, waking him up abruptly. Seeing that he couldn't dodge, he could only endure the piercing pain in his brain. He jerked his shoulder and lifted his shattered arm. The surrounding ground was eroded, creating a lot of gravel. The gravel surged upwards rapidly, enveloping the mummy. A dry and harsh wind blew in all directions, sweeping up many pieces of gravel and sand and propelling them upwards. The sound of a blunt knife cutting flesh rang out. Strong winds blew in all directions, blowing out fine sand and flesh, which fell to the ground like rain. Bam! After an explosion, the misty sword radiance and strong wind dissipated. Ran Li, sword in hand, did a somersault in midair and descended gracefully. Not only was the mummy's yellowish-white bandages gone, even his charred skin was almost completely shaved off. There were several hideous and eye-catching wounds on his body and head. One could almost see his dull organs and grayish-white brain. His left arm was severed at the shoulder, and his right hand had lost its palm and wrist. He looked extremely miserable. But strangely, he didn't shed a single drop of blood. Instead, he used the momentum to leap up and towards the rapidly approaching Constantine. To him, at this moment, the vampire bat was unprecedentedly adorable and handsome. Constantine's figure appeared clearly in Lu Cheng's eyes. His speed was truly terrifying. Suddenly, Ren Li, who had yet to land, swayed in midair, as though she had transformed into an unrestrained gale. She changed directions and used the momentum of her fall to release a green glow. Her sword sliced through the air, heading straight for the Dark Knight Bat. The 126th style of the Wind Sect, Unfettered Wandering. Lu Cheng completely ignored Constantine, who was about to attack. He arched his body until it was almost parallel to the ground and retracted his chi and blood, following which, he straightened his back abruptly and raised his hands high into the air. All of a sudden, extreme darkness appeared around him, and the darkness was dotted with bright and scorching stars, as if the universe had shrunk down. With a whoosh, the starry sky shot upwards as Lu Cheng raised his hands. In an instant, it spread and enveloped the mummy. Frost immediately formed on the surface of the mummy's body. As though his body was sealed, he lost all ability to change directions in midair. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. The stars enlarged and transformed into Emperor Yen. They bombarded the mummy's body in a frenzy, producing intense explosions and igniting flames that could bury everything. No! The mummy's screams came to an abrupt end. His body was torn apart by the terrifying chain of explosions and turned to ashes in the blazing white flames. This was the secret art that combined cultivation and martial arts, the foundation that allowed Lu Cheng to make the great leap, Cosmic Phantom. At this moment, the mummy's severed left arm and right palm fell to the ground, stirring up dust. It was a lonely story of the glory days of a physical invulnerability mighty one. Bam! Of course, Constantine wouldn't let Ranli cut him in half. He dodged to the side, and as the afterimage slowly faded away, he clenched his fist and hit the side of his opponent's sword. His opponent was sent flying, but Ranli still landed steadily on the ground. Before he could turn around and attack Lu Cheng, Constantine heard the mummy's screams, saw fire rain falling, and saw ashes and dust drifting in the air. His scalp went numb. Pushing off the ground, Constantine sprinted into the distance, leaving behind afterimages as though he had spread his wings. He was so decisive that he wanted to shake off the two ambushers with his speed. At this moment, a strong gust of wind blew and green flashed. In a few leaps, Ranli had caught up to Constantine's back. She was also good at speed and footwork. Originally, she would have been slower than Constantine since she had just broken through. However, her opponent was seriously injured. Seeing that Ranli was entangled with the Dark Knight Bat, Lu Cheng imitated Satha with his own realm. The pores under his feet and on his back opened up at the same time. Emperor Yen force exploded slightly, spewing out bluish-white flames. Using the recoil, Lu Cheng seemed to have transformed into a rocket launching a satellite.
Clenching his fist, he leaped over 100 meters with a bang and punched the side of Constantine's face.
Chapter 608. The sudden burst of light illuminated Constantine's pale face.
The shadow created by a fist grew larger and larger, and soon covered the side of his face. Before the fist made contact, the terrifying force and the exaggerated sense of impact could be felt, as if it could easily shatter a thick steel plate.
At the same time, Renly swung her sword 3 times. Thin and sharp green wind blades slashed out horizontally as though she was going to cut her opponent into 4 pieces. Faced with such a situation, Constantine didn't dare hesitate. He immediately made up his mind. Dark light rose around him, rolling and viscous. Black gas filled the air and enveloped his body. Bam! Lu Cheng's jet impact hit the dark light on Constantine's side. Black spots splattered everywhere and the fog dispersed. The rapid sound of collision lasted for a long time, like drilling. Puff, puff, puff. 3 streaks of misty sword light landed on Constantine's body. The dark light fluttered like black butterflies, but its sharpness and strength were taken away. In the blink of an eye, the dark light and black gas around Constantine dissipated, revealing his tattered tuxedo and dust-stained white shirt. His illusory body was revealed. His face was so pale that it was almost transparent. The finger in his mouth fell limply. He seemed to have lost all weight and traces of his existence. Following the momentum of the impact, he drifted swiftly into the distance. Lu Cheng and Renly were about to give chase when the scattered dark light and black spots suddenly circled around like countless bats that had suddenly risen from an underground cave. They glowed with a dark red light and carried a sense of danger. They seemed to have bared their fangs, forcing the 2 of them to give chase. One of them launched a heavy scorching punch and chased after the flames, while the other turned into a surging tornado with sword light. Both were blocked. Whoosh! Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The numerous small dark night bats quickly gathered and drilled into Constantine's body. He regained his sense of substance and was no longer illusory. His complexion also returned to normal.
Dark Night Reunion.
This not only defused Lu Cheng and Renly's attacks but also helped Constantine put a safe distance between them. Seeing Renly charging at him with her sword and a fireball circling around Lu Cheng's body, a dark light flashed in Constantine's dark red eyes. He snapped his right hand. Pa! All of a sudden, Lu Cheng felt his surroundings turn dark. He lost the burning light from the previous explosion, the sound of guns and cannons from the nearby military base, the bright moon and sparse stars in the sky, and the enemy's figure. It was as if his senses had been deprived. Whether it was his eyes, ears, nose, or body, there was nothing to be gained. Even the reflection of the ice mirror in his heart lake had been reduced to a radius of 1 meter around him. With a quick thought, Lu Cheng circulated his qi and blood and brought out his starry sky. He pushed his ability to foresee danger to the maximum and took the initiative to examine the situation. At the edge of absolute darkness, Constantine heaved a sigh of relief. He couldn't be bothered to gracefully bow and bid farewell. He immediately turned around and was about to flee. This move of his was known as the moonless black curtain in China, which belonged to the dark sect. In the Samano royal family, it was known as the Blood Clan's domain. It could absorb all light and sound waves within a small area, affecting the senses of the opponent and creating hallucinations. No matter how hard the opponent tried, they would not be able to escape and would only be able to walk in circles. At this moment, a green light flashed in front of Constantine's eyes. He saw Renly holding a long sword, rushing out of the darkness toward him without looking back. Her eyes were blank at first, but then they were filled with surprise and confidence. Her intuition is terrifying. As Constantine's thoughts raced, Lu Cheng strode out from behind Renly. The blazing blue fireball around him was about to shoot out. Narrowing his eyes, Constantine ignited his blood, crouched down and punched the ground. Bam! Right in front of him, the ground seemed to have been split open by an invisible sword. A crack more than 10 centimeters wide appeared, extending for almost 100 meters. It grew narrower and narrower. At the corresponding position in the the airflow was completely separated. The balcony above was also split into 2. There were at least a few floors. Lu Cheng and Renly immediately pulled their muscles and dodged to the side in time, narrowly avoiding the attack.
However, the strong wind that Ranli stirred up had already been split into two and dissipated silently.
The fireball around Lu Cheng remained in its original position and cracked in the middle. It was as though a dud had been set off. In the end, it collapsed into specks of brilliance. Constantine's punch bounced back. He crossed his arms and grabbed his ribs. Then he tore off 2 pieces of flesh and threw them to his opponents on his left and right sides. The 2 bloody lumps of flesh seemed to still be alive. They wriggled in the air and grew on their own. In an instant, they turned into 2 streaks of blood that resembled human skin. They covered Lu Cheng and Ren Li like gangrene attached to bones. Every detail was distinct, evil, and dangerous. After this attack, Constantine immediately turned around.
Without looking back, he dashed into the distance in the form of a floating light in the night and turned into a nearby street.
Facing the monster transformed from flesh and blood, Lu Cheng threw a punch without mercy.
The blazing blue flame condensed on the surface of his 5 fingers.
It kept shrinking until it finally reached its limit. Boom! White light burst out, illuminating the surroundings. The thrown flames and the shockwave swallowed the human skin like blood in an instant. They sizzled and burned to ashes. On the other side, Renly spun her sword, creating a green hurricane that rose from the bottom to the sky. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. The bloody human skin fell into the hurricane as if it was in a cutting machine. In a few moments, it was cut into countless crimson water droplets that scattered over a dozen meters around them. Lu Cheng and Ren Li didn't waste any time. One of them secretly activated the attainment formula, while the other used the wind steps. They swept across the road at high speed and entered the street where Constantine's aura remained. After chasing for a few hundred meters, they came to a crossroad. They stopped at the same time and looked at each other. They saw the doubt in each other's eyes. Here, Constantine seemed to have split into 2, one to the right and the other to the front. Their auras were very real and there were traces to prove it. Lu Cheng and Ren Li used their own tracking techniques and came to the conclusion that both directions were possible. Their danger premonition didn't work because they lacked a direct stimulus. We'll each chase one side. Once we confirm it's fake, we'll go back the way we came. Lu Cheng believed that he and Ren Li could hold off Constantine's crazy attacks for a while and wait for reinforcements from their companions. The only question was whether or not Ren Li would leave and never come back. But thinking of Constantine's aura along the way, she would have a way to go back and not be afraid of getting lost. Let's hope so. Any more delays and the enemy would be far away, giving them the time to hide their aura and traces. Lu Cheng didn't dare to waste time discussing the problem. He could only trust Ren Li fully.
With a tap of his foot, he turned and dashed into the street on the right with a bang.
Ren Li's eyes were bright. She ran forward excitedly, stirring up a gust of green wind that blocked their vision. Lu Cheng chased for nearly a kilometer before a crossroad appeared in front of him. Constantine's aura and traces split into 2 again, going in opposite directions. Which direction should I go? He was a little lost. This dark night bat was really tricky to deal with. No physical invulnerability expert is easy to kill. I can only rely on my luck and pick a side. Lu Cheng muttered to himself. He habitually chose the left side. At times like this, the wrong choice was better than stopping in his tracks. The wrong choice could at least prove which side was real and which would only delay time. If he stopped, not only would he be wasting time, he wouldn't be able to come to a conclusion. Just as Lu Cheng was about to take a step, the sound of the wind came from afar. Ren Li had finished her test and caught up with him. He used his own blood and flesh to fake his aura and traces, said Ren Li slowly. Lu Cheng came to a realization and made a prompt decision. He used it again here. Let's split up again. I have a way to track him now. Ren Li didn't take a step, but emphasized proudly. What is it? Asked Lu Cheng, surprised and delighted. Ren Li opened her left hand, revealing Constantine's wriggling flesh. She smiled and said, The plague sex method. It's hard to curse him with just flesh. But within 10 kilometers, it's not a problem to track him down. Impressive. Lu Cheng gave her a thumbs up and didn't say anything else. Ren Li smiled proudly. She clenched her left hand and visualized in her mind. Her eyes glowed like a venomous insect. After a few seconds, the flesh in her fist combusted into dark red ashes and scattered on the ground. As if alive, The ashes formed a line and turned into a bloody arrow pointing to the right. Lu Cheng and Ren Li immediately took a step forward. Using their own methods, they gave chase like a high-speed train. At the next few intersections, they used the remaining ashes as a guide to break through Constantine's maze formation. After 3 minutes of chasing, they finally saw their opponent, who had slowed down and was trying to heal himself. Constantine's eyes narrowed. He said hatefully, "All of you will die." As he said this, his body lit up with a milky white glow. It was as if a god was walking on earth. All his wounds, fatigue, and exhaustion disappeared quickly. In a short moment, he was back to his peak condition. This severely depleted the savior's blood he had absorbed. All his abilities would be permanently weakened in the future. Chapter 609. The milky white light shone down, illuminating a 50-meter radius around Constantine. It was like a projection of heaven on earth. Constantine, who was wearing a tattered tuxedo and a dirty white shirt, suddenly disappeared from the Holy Light Kingdom. An instant later, he mysteriously reappeared beside Lu Cheng. Clenching his fist, he charged straight at Lu Cheng's face. It was the savior's supernatural ability, Flash. In the words of the church, to walk on earth is to walk in his kingdom. Following the change in Constantine's position, the area enveloped by the holy light also shifted. Lu Cheng's ice mirror clearly illuminated the surroundings. The moment Constantine appeared, Lu Cheng sensed it. With a twist of his waist, he turned his body from the side to the front, avoiding the enemy's attack. His left fist shot out from his waist, aiming for the opponent's lower abdomen at lightning speed. Not far away, Ren Li took a step to the side, shifting her position horizontally. She didn't turn around in a hurry. Instead, she swung her forearm, holding her sword, and swung it back. A thin but sharp green blade slashed towards Constantine's neck. Facing a pincer attack, Constantine didn't put up any defense. His joints cracked, his arm bent like a snake, and his dodged fist swung diagonally towards his opponent's head. Seeing this, the previous scene flashed across Lu Cheng's mind. When Constantine was shrouded in the milky white light, Sotha smashed a fireball at him. At the same time, he suffered a strange explosion at the same part of his body. Without any analysis or consideration of the cause and effect, Lu Cheng instantly made a decision based on his battle instincts. He detonated the Emperor Yen force in his wrist, causing his fist to shoot upwards and hit Constantine's right forearm from the bottom up. The impact caused the milky white glow to flicker, scattering starlight, and caused his opponent's punch to deviate from its original position. At the same time, a strange airflow exploded. His right forearm hurt, and he almost lost his defensive stance. As expected, Lu Cheng's heart skipped a beat as he understood. At this moment, Ren Li's green wind blade slashed at Constantine's neck, splitting the milky white light and forcing him to tilt his head subconsciously. Swoosh! The airflow stirred, and a thin blade appeared out of thin air, cutting through Ren Li's defensive squall and leaving a deep wound on her fair neck. Just as blood was about to gush out, her muscles wriggled and sealed the wound, leaving only a hideous scar. Failing to land a hit, Constantine disappeared and reappeared behind Ren Li. He threw a straight punch at his opponent's spine. The surface glowed with blood red, as if it was poisonous. Ren Li's eyes didn't change. She slightly leaned to the side and pulled back her arm. The hilt of her sword was like an iron hammer, ruthlessly colliding with the enemy's fist. Constantine paused and disappeared, leaving only afterimages. And Ren Li almost lost control of her long sword. Bam bam bam. Constantine kept flashing, as if he had become two people. He fought separately with Lu Cheng and Ren Li, not giving them a chance to launch a pincer attack. Every punch and claw of his was infused with the power of darkness and blood poison, which could invade the enemy and bring about continuous negative effects. If it weren't for Lu Cheng's Emperor Yen and Ren Li's plague sect, and the fact that force concentration could effectively neutralize the negative effects, they would have been suppressed by Constantine alone. Even so, considering the terrifying and strange rebound, both of them were a little restrained. BZZT BZZT BZZT. Around Ren Li, the milky white light was like the noon sun. It quickly melted the snow and neutralized the hidden fragrance that she had secretly cast. Bam bam bam. Lu Cheng punched and kicked, mainly defending against the enemy's frenzied attacks. He had planned to scatter the flames and trigger the rain of fire to hasten the disappearance of the Kingdom of Holy Light. It was obvious from the battle between Constantine and Sotha that such a domain would be weakened by external factors and wouldn't last long. However, after a few rounds, he keenly sensed that Dark Knight Bat's combat skills were not very outstanding. He seemed to rely more on different supernatural abilities. In less than 30 seconds of battle, he had used more than 6 types. His combat skills were only at the level of a beginner in the dance stage. He could be considered proficient, but not strong. He might have studied and practiced, but he definitely hadn't put in the most effort. With a thought, Lu Cheng swung his forearm to block when Constantine's palm, which was shrouded in black gas, came at him. Seeing that the two of them were about to collide, he suddenly unleashed the hidden Emperor Yen force, pushing his forearm up and making a sudden change in direction. Then, his joints popped and his 5 fingers stretched out rapidly, grabbing the enemy's wrist. Passing through the thin milky white brilliance, he completed the capture. Lu Cheng's other hand seemed to be shackled by the void. But that didn't stop him from loosening his grip. He twisted his arm like a snake and held it against his joints, temporarily restricting Constantine's flash. Constantine's weakness wasn't obvious when they were fighting openly. But when it came to close-quarters combat and agility, his weaknesses were exposed. At that moment, Renly stepped on the ground and changed direction. She stabbed her sword at Constantine's side and visualized it in her mind. Just as she was about to hit the milky white light, she suddenly turned the tip of her sword into a tip. Using the blade as a lever, she lifted it up. Whoosh! Wind howled. A cyan light erupted under Constantine's feet and turned into a tornado. It wrapped around him and sent him up into the air. Lu Cheng pulled back in time and wasn't affected. Wind Sek's 10th move, Breath of the 9 Heavens. While Renly was also affected by the tornado and was floating uncontrollably, Lu Cheng suddenly bent down and was parallel to the ground. The power of 9 Heavens breath surged into Constantine's body, restricting his freedom of movement within the Kingdom of Holy Light. He could only watch as his body rose. But he wasn't worried at all about Lu Cheng's accumulated power, for he was still wrapped in the milky white brilliance. Thanks to his super-strong self-healing ability, all harm must be repaid. 1 for 1, no problem. Constantine's dark red eyes flashed. Lu Cheng's eyes were wide open. He straightened his back and raised his hands as though he was questioning the heavens. Around him was the reflection of the universe. Darkness and coldness were the main elements, embellished by heaviness and scorching heat. Following the direction of his arm, the scene shot out into the Holy Light country and enveloped Constantine. The fusion of cultivation and martial arts, cosmic phantom. In an instant, the milky white light around him froze as though it had turned into an ice coffin, turning Constantine into a bug trapped in amber. How dare he? Hardly had Constantine's shock occurred to him when the stars collapsed one after another and crashed into the ice coffin. There was no end to it. Boom, boom, boom. Flames exploded in midair. Blazing white and blue fireworks bloomed, swallowing the Holy Light country completely. Boom, boom, boom. Lu Cheng seemed to be frozen in place and couldn't move. The air around him burned spontaneously, firing cannons in the air. Fireballs swarmed and exploded one after another. Boom, boom, boom. The shockwaves crashed and the fierce flames burned. Lu Cheng covered his entire body in the ice armor. He didn't hold back at all as he surged with force, shattering layer after layer of crystals. Renly landed on the ground. She twisted and turned her long sword, stirring up a strong wind that blew away many of the fireballs and scattered them around. Seeing that the ice spirit force was almost exhausted, the explosions finally stopped. Lu Cheng stamped his feet and charged out of the smoke. His body was mostly charred and injured. In midair, Constantine's milky white brilliance had completely disappeared. He no longer had the sense of holiness and holiness. His tuxedo and dark red cape had completely shattered into pieces, turning into butterflies fluttering in all directions. A few strands of his hair were still burning silently. His feet stepped through the special leather shoes with cracked bottoms and landed on the ground. He wasn't injured, and his aura didn't drop significantly. However, at this moment, he was no longer the savior. Narrowing his eyes dangerously, Constantine leaped, dodging Renly and pouncing on the exhausted and injured Lu Cheng. He wanted to finish off or severely injure one of them first. When it came to one-on-one, it was much easier to decide whether to fight or run. At this moment, Lu Cheng raised his hands and pointed to himself. He said in a deep voice, "Jia." In just a short moment, he was rejuvenated, full of energy and replenished with ice force. Other than some residual injuries, he didn't look like he had been through a fierce battle. Seeing Constantine close in, he gathered his chi and blood, gathered the universe in his lower abdomen, and shifted the stars to form the fighting formula. Suddenly, Lu Cheng's muscles expanded dramatically. Tendons popped out and moved like dragons. Bam! He threw a punch at Constantine, and the strong wind that he stirred up extinguished the flames around him. Constantine knew that Lu Cheng knew the 9 words formula, but he didn't expect him to use it like this. The shadow of the fist in his eyes grew bigger and bigger, as if he was looking at a legendary giant. Chapter 6:10. At this critical juncture, Constantine, who couldn't retract his momentum, could only stomp his right foot and push out his fists to block Lu Cheng's iron hammer. The ferocious force made all his muscles and fascia vibrate like a spring, producing a buzzing sound. Boom! At the point of contact between the two of them, the airflow exploded and white waves rippled outwards. Constantine felt as if he had turned into a pyramid with his fist as the tip. Under Lu Cheng's terrifying strength, one point led to the rest of the structure, which spread rapidly and was about to cause the collapse of the entire pyramid. Constantine didn't dare to take it head-on. His arms sank and his body floated backwards as though he was sent flying. However, the air currents in the air buffeted his body, allowing him to retreat even faster than Lu Cheng's stride. If it had been a one-on-one fight, he could have gotten rid of Lu Cheng's follow-up combo and turned the tables around with his supernatural ability. However, his opponent was not alone. He suddenly felt a sharp pain in his back. His spine felt like it was about to explode, and all his hair stood on end. Ren Li's sword flashed like a shuttle. The green needle-like light pierced towards his tailbone. It was fast and urgent, but silent. Constantine's eyes narrowed. Dark red bloodlight suddenly rose around him. His rapid retreat came to an abrupt halt. It was so strange that it seemed to violate the laws of physics. Bam! His accumulated strength exploded. He turned to the side and dodged Ren Li's fatal sword. However, this delay allowed Lu Cheng to close the distance. He gathered his chi and blood again and used the stars to form the fighting formula. Bam! He was more than 2 meters tall, with bulging muscles and bulging veins. He looked like an ancient giant from the depths of the underworld. He shook his shoulders, tightened his arms, and swung out like a sledgehammer. The shadow in his eyes deepened. Constantine took a deep breath and inflated his body like a balloon. He was more than 2 meters tall, a few times thicker. His white shirt and casual pants weren't as loose as his martial arts suit. They immediately tore apart, revealing his pale green skin and exaggerated muscles. This was an ability he had absorbed from a victim. He named it Hulk. He swung his arm like he was swinging a baseball bat and hit Lu Cheng with a bang. The muscles of the two giants bulged, and their veins were bulging. Their thick arms collided with each other, raising a tornado and deafening explosions. Rumble! Lu Cheng swung his arm back and took a step back, returning to his 1.8-meter-tall form. Constantine, on the other hand, stomped on the ground, leaving behind 2 distinct giant footprints. His body began to shrink. Right at this moment, Ren Li made her move again. Green light flashed and hacked down vertically, about to split the opponent in half. Having learned her lesson from the previous pincer attack, she didn't attack at the same time as Lu Cheng. Instead, she attacked back and forth, one after another. This was to prevent Constantine from using his supernatural ability to block both of them at the same time and create an opportunity to escape. Her overall goal was to not give him a chance to catch his breath. While the Hulk's power was still intact, Constantine slapped the side of the green sword light. Ren Li's long sword was knocked askew and almost slipped out of her hand. However, Ren Li's vertical slash was just a pretense. Her killer move came from her feet. She kicked out with both feet and exerted force in a small area, creating 2 thin but sharp wind blades that slashed at the enemy's chest. With 2 puffs, Constantine's abdomen split open, revealing hideous flesh and blood. He shrunk back to his original size as though he had been deflated. Just as he was about to reach out and grab Ren Li, She had already retreated with the wind. Lu Cheng took a step forward and used force concentration again, forming the fighting formula. Bam bam bam. His muscles swelled, exploding with gang chi sounds. His martial arts suit was stretched tight, perfectly outlining his masculine and muscular body. Seeing his opponent transform into a giant again and swing his fist at him, Constantine could only grit his teeth and summon a dark glow. Rolling black gas made everything around him sticky. Rumble! Lu Cheng landed a punch on his opponent's forearm. The violent force disintegrated his dark glow, and the black gas turned into butterflies that fluttered in all directions. Dark Night reassembly, neutralizing the force and taking away the impact. The dark glow and black gas dispersed. Constantine's face was so pale that it was almost transparent. His body seemed to have lost its sense of existence, drifting away with the wind like an illusion. At this moment, Ranli used wind steps and caught up with him. She jumped up before the countless vampire bats could fly back to reassembly. She turned around in midair, head down and legs up. Whoosh! The wind howled and the sword flashed. The clear mist spun at high speed, bringing with it a tornado that enveloped Constantine. The wind sec's 12th move. Heaven's Burial. The tornado was getting stronger and stronger, and the sharpness was getting stronger and stronger. Constantine's head was being attacked by the sword will, and his head felt like it was splitting open. He roared forcefully, and the bats flew back faster. When the wind stopped, Ren Li's figure reappeared. She flipped around with her sword 10 centimeters above Constantine's head and landed firmly behind her enemy. Constantine shielded his head with his arms. His eyes were blank and unfocused. Before Lu Cheng could attack again, a series of smooth cuts suddenly appeared on the surface of his body, following which, the wind exploded, tearing his body into pieces. Constantine's arms were broken into 5 pieces, and there were countless pieces of his torso. Only his legs were still intact. Along with his internal organs, they were scattered all over the place. Bam! Constantine's head finally hit the ground. Due to his protection, there weren't any wounds. However, the light in his eyes had dimmed, leaving behind only confusion and unwillingness. That was tough, Ranli exclaimed in satisfaction as she sheathed her sword. Dark Night Bat wasn't just strong, he had many tricks up his sleeves. Even with her and Lu Cheng working together, they almost couldn't hold him back. Let's leave this place first. I'm afraid that the general will notice us and come back, suggested Lu Cheng as he looked around. Okay. Ren Li was also exhausted. She didn't want to watch the commotion in the military base. Instead, she and Lu Cheng left the place and came to the entrance of the highway in the north of the city. Ren Li looked at the sky and said, I have to meet up with Priest in Decca. I won't stay there for long. I'll leave as well. I'll consider returning to the war-torn zones after I master the Wind Sec's physical invulnerability chapters. I might even participate in the title match. What about you? Yeah. We haven't mastered our respective physical invulnerability chapters. Compared to enemies of the same level, our weaknesses are more obvious. Lu Cheng nodded in agreement.
If it weren't for the fact that his cosmic phantom was equivalent to a physical invulnerability secret art, he might not have been able to take down Dark Night Bat or the Mummy.
After lamenting, Lu Cheng continued. I won't be going to Decca. I'll make a trip back to Fatuat first. I'll get information on Lin Ke and see where he was last seen. Do we need to enter the war-torn zones? If possible, Lu Cheng planned to ask his master to bring him the Ice Sec's physical invulnerability chapters. He would enter the war-torn zones to look for Lin Ke after he mastered the basics. All right then. I'll be leaving first. Ranli replied with a smile. She waved her hand casually and ran south without looking back. She was full of confidence as she ran back to Kukhang. The corner of Lu Cheng's mouth twitched. He hurriedly stopped her and pointed her in the right direction. After watching Ranli leave, he thought for a moment and returned to Kukhang. He took a detour to the place where he fought with Constantine. After the death of the Dark Night Bat, Lu Cheng didn't feel relieved or relieved. Instead, he still felt tense, as though he still had a premonition of danger.
That was why he planned to return to the battlefield and examine it carefully.
He also planned to take a piece of Constantine's flesh with him and hand it over to the military for research. At the place where the physical invulnerability experts had last fought, smoke drifted in the air and body parts were scattered everywhere. A few flames burned weakly in the surroundings. Everything was as quiet as an oil painting.
After a few minutes, Constantine's head suddenly moved. His dark red eyes rippled with vitality once again. He exhaled a thin red mist that shrouded the surroundings. The pieces of flesh wriggled strangely, slowly returned, and reformed. After failing to severely injure the two enemies in the Kingdom of Holy Light, Constantine knew that he wouldn't be able to escape by normal means. Therefore, he didn't make any unnecessary attempts. Instead, he worked hard to create a situation. He used the final and most bizarre ability of the Savior to escape his predicament. Resurrection. As long as his head wasn't crushed and his flesh was still intact, he could be resurrected. For this reason, he appeared to be at a loss. He alternated between arrogance and shock. After a dozen minutes, the mangled Constantine finally stood up. Every wound on his body was still there, making him look like a terrifying stitched monster. He was at his weakest now. His self-healing ability wasn't enough to heal his wounds. "I will repay you properly." Constantine gritted his teeth as he struggled to move away. He was very weak now and didn't want to take any risks. He didn't want to be seen by Lieutenant General Amon, who might come to investigate after noticing the commotion. At this moment, his heart skipped a beat. He turned his head to the north and stared at Lu Cheng, whose face was full of astonishment. They stared at each other. "No!" Constantine roared in grief and anger. He tried to stagger away. Why is he back? In his confusion and shock, Lu Cheng instinctively activated the attainment formula. A strong wind blew as he rushed to his opponent. He shook his left arm and threw a punch at the strange enemy's face. Constantine raised his fists to block but was knocked away. Lu Cheng's right fist, heavy and scorching white, followed up with a bang and landed on the enemy's nose. Crack! Constantine's nose collapsed. His face was deformed and cracked. His eyes were filled with fear and despair. Then, the white light exploded. Boom! Countless fragments, stained with red and white colors, sprayed out, painting a beautiful abstract oil painting. P.S. Begging for monthly votes. Chapter 6:11. Bam! After smashing Constantine's head with one punch, Lu Cheng lifted his left leg and lashed out again with a whip kick. With a layer of blazing blue flames, his kick landed on his opponent's body. Smoke and dust flew up, and the body that hadn't completely fused back together was torn apart again. His body was set ablaze and slowly burned, emitting specks of red light. Only then did Lu Cheng heave a sigh of relief. He had never heard of a mighty one who could resurrect after being dismembered. Even the vampire emperor of the Samano royal family couldn't do it. Only the Mission sect had always claimed that the savior from 2,000 years ago could do it. However, they had added too many religious elements and mysteries to this story, so it wasn't as believable. Who would have thought that Dark Knight Bat would be able to accomplish such an unbelievable feat? It was almost like a miracle. If it weren't for the fact that he had a premonition of danger and the alarm in his heart hadn't been lifted, he might have been able to escape. There would have been no end of trouble. Just as Lu Cheng was about to burn this strange enemy to ashes, he suddenly realized that the blood flowing out of his body had changed into different shades of red. There was dark red, rusty red, pale red, bright red, and so on. They intersected with each other, dotted with faint blue and milky white, and bubbled from time to time. This didn't look like blood at all. It looked more like a carelessly added chemical reagent. Constantine's muscles and tendons were also wriggling, each growing in a collapsing fashion. Some were paralyzed, while others grew new fingers. It was a hair-raising sight. "Gene collapse," muttered Lu Cheng, frowning slightly. He had seen the tragic state of a gene collapse in the military's research materials. It was very similar, except that Dark Knight Bat's blood was even stranger. After a few seconds, all the changes disappeared. The flesh lost all signs of life. Some rotted rapidly, while others were perfectly preserved. "This is so F***ing weird." Lu Cheng couldn't help but curse. He found a piece of flesh the size of half a palm, sealed it in layers of ice, and kept it in his pocket. As for the rest, he smashed down with his fist, causing blazing white flames to spread in all directions as they collided with the ground, burning them to ashes, leaving no medium for resurrection. After doing all that, he finally had the time to think about how Dark Knight Bat could come back to life.
Could it be that his body structure has mutated to the point that it's similar to an earthworm? As long as it's not cut vertically, it doesn't matter if it's split in half? But just now his heart was his heart, his lungs were his lungs, and his liver was his liver. There was nothing special about it. Perhaps his mutated root pulp is similar to a single-celled organism and can survive for a while. As long as it gathers again within a certain period of time, it won't completely lose its vitality. And this gathering is guided by the mind. So there shouldn't be any problems with the brain? Forget it. I won't think about it anymore. I'm not a researcher. I'll leave it to the military. But there's one thing I'm certain of. Dark Knight Bat's resurrection ability needs to be prepared. Otherwise, he could very well trade my life with injuries. Although Ren Li's sky burial is powerful, it doesn't threaten my life right from the start. It's more of a serial attack. At this point, Lu Qing still didn't know the names of the two enemies just now, so he could only call them by their nicknames. After looking around, Lu Qing didn't stay any longer. He left Kukhang at high speed and headed back to the port city of Fartuat. He only rested for a while when he found a secluded spot in the desert. He used the confrontation formula to clear his mind and body and accelerate the recovery of his injuries. After Lieutenant General Amon led the troops to occupy Sotho's military base, he returned to the temporary base amidst the lingering gunfire. He waited for a long time but didn't see the mummy or Constantine return. He doesn't want his sarcophagus anymore? He's so badly injured. Amon was puzzled. He felt that something was amiss and immediately got up. Traversing through the urban jungle, he sprinted back to the battlefield where Sotha had been forced to self-destruct. He looked around and quickly found the mummy's severed arm and palm. The yellowish-white bandages were all gone, and the charred skin had been sliced clean like a fruit, leaving only flesh and bones. He's dead. Amon narrowed his eyes, shocked and furious. There must have been a fierce battle here. Unfortunately, the gunfire in the military base was louder and the flames were brighter. Amon didn't notice anything amiss. Plus, no matter how badly injured the mummy was, he was still a demigod. He shouldn't have been killed so easily. Did Dark Knight Bat do it? Amon followed the trail, but it had been a long time. His aura had long since dissipated, so he could only give up halfway. But in the meantime, he found Constantine's attack that had split the ground open. He found the flesh and blood that had been deliberately set up. This made Amon overturn his previous guesses. His heart grew colder and colder. When he sent a regiment of soldiers to search the surroundings, he finally found another battlefield. He saw shattered bones covered in brain matter and ashes everywhere. Dark Knight Bat is dead too. Amon gasped, his heart skipping a beat. After working together, he had a better understanding of Constantine's strength and expertise. Judging from his mysterious behavior, he definitely had some hidden abilities. Even Amon wasn't confident in winning, let alone killing him. Killing two demigods in one go, even if one was heavily injured and the other a weakened demigod, wasn't an easy feat. It might even be extremely difficult. Just the thought of an enemy lurking in the dark sent chills down his spine. After a few seconds of silence, Lieutenant General Amon returned to the temporary encampment. He didn't search or pursue the matter, afraid that he would accidentally hit a steel plate and lose his life. In the heavily guarded headquarters, he reported to the pharaoh. On the other end of the line, there was silence at first. Then he asked, "Any clues?" "No. They destroyed the corpse and destroyed the traces. But from the remnants of Impose's arm and palm, at least one of the enemies is skilled in cutting," Amon answered honestly. There was silence on the other end of the line again. After a while, he finally spoke. "Put it aside for now. Maintain order in Kukhang. We'll investigate after this is over." "That's good too." Outside Fartuat port, on a cruise ship, the sky was high and the sea was blue. The wind was clear and the scenery was vast. Lu Cheng stood on the deck, admiring the waves of the Sea of Death. He took out the satellite phone he had borrowed from the consulate and called his master. After recuperating, he had completely recovered. He had also changed out of his tattered martial arts suit, and was now leaving with the last batch of evacuees from the port city. "Hello." Before long, Shi Jiangwo's aged voice sounded from the other end of the line. "Master, it's me. Cirrus and his family have evacuated from Nile." Lu Cheng explained the final details of the mission. I knew about it last night. Not bad.
You did well, praised Geyser with a forced smile. This was supposed to be a difficult mission filled with danger. He might even have to exchange blows with a physical invulnerability mighty one. With his disciple's supernatural ability awakened for the third time and his body tempered by the Gene Dan, he wouldn't die so easily. But the stimulation would definitely help him build up his willpower and make the great leap. In the end, he advanced in advance without external help. Not only did the mission become redundant, but its difficulty also plummeted. Lu Cheng briefly described the process and asked, "Master, is there any urgency with Lin Ke? Should I practice the physical invulnerability chapter or look for him first?" With brother-in-law's strength, it wouldn't be easy for him to get into trouble in the war-torn zones. It shouldn't be a problem to delay it for a while. Shi Jiangwo coughed and said, "There's no hurry. Old man Ji has changed his mind. He got Shushan Studies men in the war-torn zones to watch over him and the military to help. He might also go for a stroll himself. You don't have to worry about that. Come back first. Practice the physical invulnerability chapter and stabilize your connection." Lin Ke is a prideful brat. Old man Ji deliberately sent him to the war-torn zones to train. He asked you to look for him as an excuse to train you. But now, what's the point of training? All right, sighed Lu Cheng. If brother-in-law hadn't awakened his supernatural ability in advance for the sake of becoming the national champion, he would have reached the peak of the inhuman stage by now. If he had trained for 2 years in the war-torn zones, he might have been able to reach the physical invulnerability stage. But he had just entered the inhuman stage and had just stabilized his foundation. As for the physical invulnerability stage, that was even further away. Lu Cheng closed his eyes and thought about Lin Ke's cold and reserved face. He suddenly felt that he wouldn't turn back until he reached the physical invulnerability stage. Hope for the best. Geyser didn't dwell on this matter. After a moment of silence he said, "Are you going to return to Longhu after mastering the basics of the physical invulnerability chapter?" "Yeah. I owe the Dragon King and the club too much," replied Lu Cheng with certainty. "That's good too. You haven't practiced the physical invulnerability chapter of the Fire Sect. If you complete a few more secret missions, you might be able to comprehend the divine kung fu of the Restriction Sect," said Geyser happily. "Secret missions?" asked Lu Cheng thoughtfully. "They should have told you before. After joining Longhu, you will occasionally have to complete missions assigned by the military. For an inhuman, it's very simple. All you have to do is be a security guard and cooperate with some experiments. When you reach the physical invulnerability stage, it will be relatively more difficult but not too dangerous. Cough. Dangerous missions. You won't be the only one. Perhaps the Dragon King will participate as well. Anyway, after accumulating enough contributions, you will be able to comprehend the divine kung fu of the Restriction Sect of Taoism." Geyser gave a rough explanation. Half sighing and half disdainful he said, "Come back as soon as possible. Once the connection is stabilized and you have mastered the basics of the physical invulnerability chapters of the Ice and Fire Sect, you will be considered a true physical invulnerability expert. At that time, you will have plenty of opportunities to fight opponents of the same level. There will be plenty of life and death battles. Don't be like Pang and Ren, impatient to challenge physical invulnerability level enemies." Lu Cheng suddenly felt guilty. "Master, there's something I need to report to you." "What is it?" Geyser tensed up. His heart was in his mouth. This brat rarely speaks in such a tone. What did he do? Lu Cheng cleared his throat and said, "I met Renli last night. Together with her, we killed 2 physical invulnerability experts." "What did you say?" Geyser raised his voice. Chapter 6:12. Shocked by his master's reaction, Lu Cheng started from the beginning. "In order to buy time for Cirrus and his family, I chased after the mummy for a long time. Then, I moved to the east of Kukang City, planning to harass any pursuers along the way and not give them a chance. Who knew I'd run into Ran Li, who was lost? At this time, an intense battle broke out at the military base. We were curious and went to watch. On the way, we met the mummy, Dark Knight Bat, and a physical invulnerability mighty one dressed like a general. They were ganging up on Satha. That should have been Satha." He rambled on not to explain, but to give his master time to think.
We didn't plan to attack at first.
But when Sotha self-destructed, the mummy was heavily injured, and the physical invulnerability mighty one dressed like a general left. Dark Knight Bat suddenly mentioned Peng Liyun and my name.
He seemed interested in our blood. He even planned to use coup in America to lure me in.
Master, this is unacceptable.
At the end of his speech, Lu Cheng defended himself a little. Geezer Sher's tone returned to normal. So, you took action? You killed the mummy first? Tell me the details. He tried his best to act like a foolish disciple, but he couldn't help but curse in his heart. If physical invulnerability experts were easy to kill, they wouldn't be called physical invulnerability experts. I've roamed the war-torn zones for so many years, but I can count the number of people I've killed single-handedly, in groups, or in groups. You've just broken through, and you've already killed 2 of them. Is there any justice in this? Even with the help of demonic matriarch Qi's disciple, Ran Li, and the fact that the mummy was heavily injured after a fierce battle, it was still shocking news. Lu Qing immediately described the battle from beginning to end, including his self-created cosmic phantom, and how Dark Knight Bat was sewn back together after being dismembered, and how he came back to life. Geezer Sher's attention was diverted. He said, half shocked and half in awe, Dark Knight Bat suddenly appeared. This black bat appeared out of nowhere. Even the Americans are confused. They don't even know who he is. Heh, only their popular superhero culture can create something like this. We sent agents to investigate the battlefield where a few physical invulnerability mighty ones died and found that the black bat is indeed powerful. He doesn't seem like someone who has just made a breakthrough. Tiska SK, the mission sect has always been praising the resurrection of the Savior. They claim that his blood contains the password to life. Who would have thought that the vampire-like black bat also has it? Brat, you didn't forget to bring back a piece of black bat's flesh, did you? This concerns whether or not your master's old injuries can be healed. Lu Cheng was overjoyed. I definitely haven't forgotten. At least 3 tails. Are you trying to weigh pork? Geezer Sher scolded jokingly. Master, can this really heal your old injuries after studying it? Lu Cheng asked with concern. Geezer Sher was silent for a moment. He sighed, which was a rare sight. Back then, I was one of the best in the war-torn zones. I was practically invincible. At this point, he paused again, as though he was reminiscing about the glorious days of the past. There's something wrong with your use of idioms. Lu Cheng criticized silently, not daring to interrupt. Sigh, it's a pity that I met a forbidden expert later on. This old man will never forget that battle. Although I managed to escape from danger, I was severely injured. His strange power invaded my body and fused into my root pulp like cancer cells. If Elder May hadn't restrained it in my lungs, I would have gone to meet my ancestors long ago. That external root pulp is inseparable from my own. They have almost become one. No matter how many methods are used to kill all the indiscriminate creatures in that area, it will reappear as new roots grow. If I were to change my lungs, my root pulp would have already mutated. The rejection reaction would kill all organs that aren't my own. Cough cough. My spirit fed back to my body and increased my tolerance, but I still couldn't completely digest it. If the military can find something from black bat's flesh, this problem might be completely solved. This was the first time Lu Cheng heard his master talk about his injuries. He couldn't help but ask, Master, which forbidden expert was it? Heh, what's the matter? You still want to avenge your master? Geezer Sher snorted, then softened his tone. We'll talk about it when you enter the forbidden territory. I'm telling you now, if you do anything stupid and impulsive, I won't be able to hold you back. You make it sound like I'm a dog that will break free from its leash and run away when you're not paying attention. Lu Cheng complained inwardly. He didn't ask any more questions and set a return date with his master. After hanging up, he looked at the golden light shining in the waves and called Yen Zheka. Hello. The girl's soft and gentle voice sounded a little nervous. Lu Cheng retracted his gaze, restrained his smile and said hurriedly, I've completed my mission. Yen Zheka's tone lightened. Awesome. I knew missions would be easier after you reached physical invulnerability. She paused and said, Are you going to the war-torn areas to look for my brother next? No need. My master said that your grandpa, our grandpa has found someone else from Shushan study. He wants me to hurry back to the sect to practice the physical invulnerability chapters and consolidate my realm. Lu Cheng replied with a smile, his expression gradually relaxing. That's for the best. With Grandpa involved, he's worth two. Yen Zheka said in a good mood. Then she said with a hint of worry, but with my brother's stubborn temper, there's no way to bring him back unless he's knocked out. Lu Cheng didn't hide his thoughts and said, I reckon he'll stay in the war-torn areas in the end, but he'll find a physical invulnerability expert from the military or Shushan study to look after him in secret. Brother-in-law is holding his breath and won't return until he reaches physical invulnerability. Sometimes, my brother is really too tense. Yen Zheka sighed. After chatting for a while about Lin Ke, Lu Cheng said with a sigh and a smile, Ku, our summer vacation trip was interrupted not long after it started. It's okay. This experience is better than 10 trips. Besides, we saw the aurora and the pyramids this year. It's enough. Yen Zheka comforted him. I'm going to train at Yambing Mountain. Why don't you come over? Just treat it as a vacation. I can't train the whole day. Physical invulnerability level secret arts are very taxing on the mind. Lu Cheng suggested with a smile. Yen Zheka replied happily. After confirming the details, Lu Cheng boasted, Ku, I met Ranli who was lost last night. We worked together and killed 2 physical invulnerability experts. That can't be. Yen Zheka was stunned. She asked in confusion. That's a good reaction. Lu Cheng was secretly pleased. He told her the whole story, especially emphasizing Dark Knight Bat's bad intentions. Yen Zheka was stunned. She felt touched and warm, but at the same time, felt that the supernatural ability of the enemy didn't seem to exist in reality. The wind on the deck was strong. With no one around, the call lasted for a long time. He even condensed frost to lower the temperature of the satellite phone. By the time he finished the call, the cruise was nearing the shore. Only then did he seriously consider whether the military would reimburse him for the phone bill. Tigny's city. Lin Ke restrained the enemy and punched him in the chest, crushing his heart. Bam, bam, bam. His punches and kicks connected, leaving the enemy without a complete corpse. After doing all this, Lin Ke bent over, put his hands on his knees, and panted heavily. His black hair, which he hadn't taken care of for some time, hung down, almost covering his dark and introverted eyes. Sweat soaked everything. There were obvious wounds on his body. There was even blood at the corner of his mouth. After a few seconds, he forced himself to stand up straight and took a deep look at the enemy. A mafia organization that abducts adults, traffics children, and breeds organs for the rich and powerful, waiting to be matched, could casually send out an expert with inhuman combat strength. Is this the war-torn zone? Retracting his gaze, Lin Ke turned into a run-down street. The people guarding the entrance were children in their teens, carrying real guns. His footsteps were light. Lin Ke's back slowly disappeared at the end of the street. Wuyue Province, Shanggao Airport. Lu Cheng got off the flight in a relaxed manner. He didn't have any luggage, only his phone, wallet, and the special gifts he bought in Acropolis. With so many people coming and going, he didn't have to worry about stray bullets or explosions. He was safe and smiling everywhere. He turned on his phone as he walked. While chatting with Yen Zheka, he sent a message to the driver who had contacted him before he got on the plane. I'm here. The driver replied quickly, saying that he was beside the pillar facing the arrival hall exit. He didn't describe what he was wearing because he believed he could recognize Lu Cheng, the former heavenly son of the era. He's been out of the martial arts circle for almost a year due to injuries. He's about to make a comeback. I wonder how he's doing. The driver guessed curiously. After a few minutes, he saw Lu Cheng walk out. He was wearing a white t-shirt with exotic patterns, casual pants that reached his ankles, and dark-colored running shoes. His posture was leisurely and his expression was peaceful. He didn't look like he had just gone through a bad time or suffered a heavy blow. Hello, Martial Uncle Lu. The driver approached him with a smile. He was half an Ice God sect disciple and had served in the sect for almost a decade. Hello. Lu Cheng nodded with a smile. He was approachable, but clearly didn't want to chat. The driver understood and didn't nag. He led Lu Cheng to the parking lot, pressed the key, opened the door, and invited him in. Lu Cheng sat in the back and leaned back comfortably. Sometimes he chatted with his wife, sometimes he closed his eyes to rest. The driver occasionally glanced at him through the rear-view mirror.
He felt that this martial uncle of his had an outstanding bearing.
He was neither arrogant nor self-abased.
He had the air of a grandmaster.
The injuries this year have really trained me. The driver thought to himself as he drove the car more steadily. After a while, the car drove into Yambing Mountain. Looking at the surrounding scenery, Lu Cheng sighed. The last time he was here, he had just gotten rid of a hidden danger and was in the midst of recuperation. He was relaxed and had some baggage. But now, he was at peace, at ease. A physical invulnerability expert was considered a top executive anywhere. Outside the sect, Lu Cheng got out of the car. With a smile on his face, he walked through halls and rooms. Under the greetings of disciples and servants, he arrived at the Ice Queen Pavilion. In the pavilion, Geezer Sher was drinking a little wine and shaking his head. He, whose white hair was thinning, came to a spot near the door. He sized Lu Cheng up and suddenly sighed. The younger generation will surpass us in time. Chapter 6:13. Lu Cheng would be lying if he said he didn't feel proud and happy after hearing He Yi's words. However, he had been through a lot, so he kept a smile on his face and bowed.
Sect master, you flatter me.
Geezer Sher curled his lips in disdain. He Yi shook his head and laughed. You don't have to be humble about this.
Anyone with a discerning eye can see it clearly.
Reaching physical invulnerability before the age of 23 is a few months earlier than Wisdom King. Even in the history of the past 1,000 years, it's rare. At this moment, Shi Jiangwo interrupted. Sect master, don't praise him like that. This brat is so proud that his tail is about to stand up.
It's good to reach the physical invulnerability level, but from now on, you have to forget all your previous achievements because your opponents will become physical invulnerability experts.
Which physical invulnerability expert isn't a dragon or phoenix among men? Although you and Little Ren have killed 2 of them together, don't forget that they went through tough battles. Master, you're right, but why do I feel like you're showing off?
Lu Cheng complained in his mind, but he still answered respectfully. You're right, master.
Then hurry up and practice the physical invulnerability chapters. Geezer Sher glared at him, then asked worriedly, Have you given the black bat's meat to the military? I gave it to them in Acropolis, Lu Cheng said honestly, but he was complaining in his heart. If I didn't give it to the military in advance, how would I get on the plane? Should I tell the security that it's fresh beef? I don't want to be treated as a psychopathic murderer. You're quite reliable, Geezer Sher praised him reluctantly. He didn't nag further. He turned and led Lu Cheng underground. After passing through layers of barriers, they entered the secret hall. This place didn't change much from the last time Lu Cheng was here. It was still filled with whistling cold wind and falling goose feathers. In the middle of the room was a transparent cabinet with the ice essence bead. The 4 walls were hung with visualization diagrams of the 9 physical invulnerability unique arts. In front of each diagram was a stone table with a set of moves, detailed explanations, and notes of predecessors. Make good use of it, but try not to spend more than 3 hours a day, He reminded with a smile. There was a fundamental difference between understanding the surface of physical invulnerability unique arts and practicing it directly. Yes, martial uncle sect master. Now that Lu Cheng was standing in an extremely cold environment, there was no need for him to circulate his flame force to warm his body. It was as if he had become one with the heaven and earth around him. He watched as He slowly walked away.
After the heavy door was tightly shut, he went to the vicinity of the 5th style, enemy heart-freezing move without hesitation.
He looked at the heart of 7 orifices that looked like an ice crystal mirror. The frosty white fog around it shrank and expanded, making everything seem to come alive.
The reason why he chose to practice this unique skill first was because he had already reached the realm of encountering gods in the void.
His spirit had also undergone a qualitative change after making the Great Leap, so he should be able to get started in no time. He sat down cross-legged on the snow-covered ground. His deep eyes, which seemed to contain a vast starry sky, reflected the mysterious and transparent heart that communicated with the fine details. Gradually, the suspended visualization diagram didn't change. However, the enemy heart-freezing move in Lu Cheng's pupils began to contract and expand slowly and rhythmically. Lube-dub, lube-dub, lube-dub. The two heartbeats seemed to have merged into one. He felt as if the dust had dissipated. His body and mind were at peace. His emotions were no longer stirred. Gradually, various things appeared around him. This is similar to the confrontation formula. Lu Cheng thought to himself. Using the stone of the mountain, he started to work on the jade. Time flew by as he practiced. Everything was silent. After an unknown period of time, Lu Cheng suddenly felt something. He could actually hear He Yi's footsteps through a few heavy metal doors. Below the silver-covered ground, a few bugs were slowly traversing. Naturally, a vivid image of them appeared in his mind, as if he was seeing it with his own eyes. The world was peaceful. Everything was in harmony. Everything was so beautiful. Lu Cheng seemed to have changed his perspective and gotten to know nature all over again. This is the enemy heart-freezing move. He half closed his eyes and sighed in satisfaction. Using the experience from the confrontation formula and the solid foundation of Ice Mirror, he was able to reach the threshold of enemy heart-freezing move in just 3 hours. With another 2 or 3 practice sessions, he would be able to grasp the basics. Apart from the ability to see oneself, the enemy heart-freezing move also had part of the effects of the confrontation formula and all the characteristics of the forwarding formula. In gaming terms, it was an increase in resistance to negative emotions and mental attacks. Apart from that, the enemy heart-freezing move could also see the opponent, sense their emotions, grasp their movements, and make predictions in advance. It was like a demon. It also seemed to have improved in terms of premonition and intuition. Shaking his slightly swollen head, Lu Cheng stood up and walked towards the door. During the practice session, snow didn't accumulate on the surface of his body. Due to the instinctive reaction of his muscles and skin, he flicked off every goose feather that landed on his body. Refreshed, he walked out of the secret hall. Seeing that his master had already left, he walked slowly towards the Songtao Pavilion with his hands in his pockets. From time to time, he would take pictures of the mountain scenery and share the joy of his gains with Yan Zheka. As for the girl who had just entered the dance stage, she was practicing the corresponding martial arts of the fighting sect and the Ji family. Her life was fulfilling and satisfying. Walking around the corridor, Lu Cheng saw a martial arts training ground. Many Ice God sect disciples were practicing under the guidance of their instructors. They were sweating profusely and full of vigor. The real headquarters of the Ice God sect was located in the Ice God building in Moshang. Apart from a few ceremonies, most matters were handled there. However, the ancestral grounds were quiet and far away from the hustle and bustle. It was perfect for new disciples to focus on their practice and build a solid foundation. Seeing Lu Cheng slowly walking over from the corner of his eye, the instructors quickly turned around and greeted him with a salute. "Greetings, Martial Uncle Lu." The disciples followed the rules and didn't stop their practice. However, they couldn't help but sneak a few glances at Lu Cheng. Seeing such a scene reminded Lu Cheng of himself and what happened back then. His heart was filled with joy. He nodded gently and said, "Everyone, practice hard." He stood idly by and watched for a while before strolling away amidst the increasingly hard-working and serious performance of the disciples. Passing through the corridor under the shade of the trees, he returned to the Songtao Pavilion. The pine forest here was verdant and undulating, just like before. Ice God Building. Zhu Tai had already become a senior executive in charge of a certain industry. He had just walked out of the elevator and turned to his office when he suddenly saw his junior brother, Lei Fong. Seeing how the confident and energetic Lei Fong had turned into a steady and disciplined person, Zhu Tai sighed inwardly. He pushed his glasses up and greeted him with a smile. "Why didn't you go over there?" "I'm here to collect my pocket money," replied Lei Fong calmly with a slight smile. He had officially joined the Wuxia club a few months ago and was arranged to participate in several high-level professional matches. Zhu Tai nodded and sighed. "Good luck." A 26-year-old Inhuman is not hopeless for a physical invulnerability expert. Unlike me, it's already impossible. He was already 32 years old and could clearly feel the stagnation of his mental growth and the solidification of his visualization. Initially, Zhu Tai was rather dissatisfied with Lei Fong and was secretly jealous of his master's favoritism. However, when his hope was cut off, he gradually sobered up and calmed down. However, when he woke up at night, he was still depressed and couldn't get over it. Then I'll thank senior brother in advance for your auspicious words.
Lei Feng lowered his head and laughed. However, in the Wuxia club, I'm not the one with the most hope of making the great leap.
Zhang Yu is 28 years old and a senior fourth pin, close to physical invulnerability.
Qian Chue is 25 years old and has been at the inhuman stage for almost a year. After saying 4 or 5 names, he laughed at himself.
I often regret my decision back then. I should have entered the Wuxia club earlier.
With so many people stronger than me and the atmosphere of competition, perhaps I wouldn't have to wait 3 years to transform from a 6th pin to an inhuman.
In the past few years, Lei Feng had stayed in the Ice God sect and participated in some low-level professional matches to hone his skills. He's still stronger than me. Zhu Tai shook his head and sighed. The two brothers exchanged pleasantries for a while before parting ways.
However, they were already on different paths.
The next morning, birds chirped in the mountains. Lu Chang had just woken up when he received a message from Yan Zhaka. She sent an emoji with fists shining. Another day of hard work. She planned to wait until she had a basic grasp of the 2 dance stage techniques before coming to Yambing Mountain for a holiday. After that, she could go to America for Aunt Du's guidance. Seeing this, Lu Chang couldn't help but smile. He replied with a handshake emoji. Let's do it together. After finishing his morning training, Lu Chang ate his breakfast and rested for a while before entering the secret hall again to practice the enemy heart freezing move. At the same time, he also observed the second move, mesmerizing snow steps. When he finished his morning training and returned to the Ice Queen Pavilion, he smiled and said, "Let's go to the Wuxia club in the afternoon."
Huh?
Lu Chang was confused. Shouldn't the focus be on training? Why should I go to the Wuxia club?
Speaking of which, I haven't been there yet.
He smiled and explained, "Go and experience the Polar Laboratory. This can help you stabilize your connection with heaven and earth as soon as possible and speed up the progress of the physical invulnerability chapters. Of course, you're still a beginner, so don't use it too often. It's better to use it once every 3 days." Lu Cheng listened with anticipation. He nodded and smiled. "Thank you for your advice, sect leader Martial Uncle." Chapter 6:14. After lunch, Lu Cheng walked out of the sect with a bag full of clothes and martial arts shoes. Breathing in the cool mountain breeze, he saw the commercial car waiting for him. He sat in the back seat and leaned back leisurely. He took out his phone and sent a message to Yan Zhaka. Snickering emoji. "I'm going to see the Polar Laboratory of the Wuxia Club." Yan Zhaka had just finished her training and washed off her sweat. She sat at the table in a knee-length red dress, waiting anxiously for the food. When she saw this message, she seemed to have thought of something and suddenly burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that she trembled slightly and subconsciously covered her mouth with her hand. After calming down, she replied seriously, "Not bad. I feel like the Polar Laboratory suits you very well."
Really?
Lu Qing asked in confusion. He didn't understand Ku's logic. Yan Zhaka sent an emoji of holding her chin and rolling her eyes. "Of course. Have you heard of the 3 idiots in the sleigh? So you're calling me an idiot in a roundabout way." Lu Cheng was enlightened. Yan Zhaka turned her head to the side out of habit and saw herself smiling like a flower on the smooth marble pillar. She almost forgot about her hunger and began to seriously discuss the possible situation of the Polar Laboratory with Lu Cheng. She only put down her phone when the lunch was served. She took small bites of her food elegantly but at a high frequency. When the scenery outside the car returned to the scorching heat of early autumn, the girl curled up on the sofa after a full meal and unknowingly fell asleep. Lu Cheng locked his phone, closed his eyes, and quickly fell asleep. He took a short nap. After 20 minutes, the Wuxia Club was in sight. The driver slowed down and turned to the main entrance. He was about to wake Lu Cheng up when he saw him open his eyes. His eyes were dark and deep, like a bottomless pool. He didn't look confused at all. "Uncle Lu, we're here." The driver was stunned for a few seconds and said softly, "Sorry to trouble you." Lu Cheng said politely. The car door opened automatically. He closed his connection with the outside world, carried the bag, and walked out steadily. A man in a suit and leather shoes came up to him. The Wuxia Club had great greenery. If there wasn't a sign, most people would think that it was a golf course. There were quite a few buildings with 3 to 5 floors scattered like pearls. It was quite natural. "Hello, Mr. Liu. I'm Su Chen, one of the supervisors in the association. Sect leader, he told me about you yesterday." "I've already arranged your schedule into the laboratory's timetable," this man in his 30s said enthusiastically with a bit of reservation. Lu Cheng thanked him with a smile and followed Su Chen. They went past the first white building and walked to the largest building near the lake. Along the way, they only met a few staff members. The grass was green and the wind, it was quiet and comfortable. "This is the place where we entertain our guests. That building near the lake. The castle is for the physical invulnerability. President Huang Ku." The building near the lake. Lu Cheng listened attentively and nodded from time to time in response to the staff's greetings. Inside the training ground for the inhuman members, Lei Feng turned into the north wind and made a few high-speed turns. Then, he came to a stop and observed the steps he had taken just now while panting slightly. After a whole morning of hard training, even with some sleep and rest, he still felt tired. His body wasn't in its best condition. If it was in the past, he would have definitely chosen to stop and not be in a hurry to succeed. But now, looking at Zhang Yu, Chen Qiue, Wu Xiaoyan, Xiao Jianliang, and the others, and seeing how hard they worked, Lei Feng could not help but extinguish the thought of leaving. He once again immersed himself in the monotonous and tedious daily cultivation. He even found a specialized trainer to train himself. Everyone here was sprinting to make the great leap. He couldn't fall behind. Coming to the north, Lu Cheng finally saw the polar laboratory after passing through a few postmodern metal doors. Of course, this was only a part of it. The laboratory covered an area of more than 1,000 square meters and was divided into 2 layers. The outer layer was made up of a few sections. There was this source room to create ultra-low temperatures, a huge computer to control the various parameters of the polar regions, a panel to display different data, and so on. It was as though he had entered the world of science fiction. The inner layer was relatively simple. Looking through the observation window, it was about 500 square meters. Other than the silver-white walls, tiny holes visible to the naked eye, and faintly discernible lines and pipes, there was nothing else. The 2 researchers in white coats didn't leave their seats. They were waiting for Su Chen's announcement. Su Chen thought for a while and said, "Mr. Liu, shall we set the temperature to -75 degrees Celsius? This is a relatively low temperature in the real polar regions. In addition to the random simulated snowstorm, it can be as low as -90 degrees Celsius." At this point, he explained with a smile, the laboratory can reach -120 degrees Celsius, -150 degrees Celsius, or even lower. But it's mostly used for short-term stimulation to help the human body recover. In such an environment, even a physical invulnerability mighty one can't stay for too long. They have to come out after training for a while. Oh right, there's an emergency button inside. If you can't hold on any longer, you can notify the outside. This was Lu Cheng's first experience, so he didn't know much about it. He smiled and said, "Okay, I'll leave it to you." Su Chen turned and walked to the control room. He told the lab staff the general requirements. After a while, the polar regions took shape. All the parameters were met. A staff member opened the complicated sealed door and invited Lu Cheng in. Lu Cheng put down his bag, phone, and wallet. At first glance, he saw that the interior was clean and pure. There was no smoke or fog. But the moment he stepped in, he immediately felt a bone-piercing chill. As he breathed, the mucous membranes in his throat seemed to be frostbitten. At this moment, he was wearing a thin summer martial arts suit. Hearing that the cabin was sealed shut, Lu Cheng exhaled. He released the restraints on his mind between his eyebrows. Instantly, he felt that every pore and every cell in his body had come alive. He connected with the low temperature of the polar regions and felt as comfortable as a fish that had returned to the water. This was the first time Lu Cheng could clearly feel the connection between himself and the environment. His body and mind felt happy. He sat down cross-legged and started visualizing to stabilize the channel of communication. He originally thought that this place would only improve his sensitivity to the extreme cold. But after treating his surroundings as the darkness of the universe, the scene in his mind changed naturally. All that was left was the heavy great sun that dispelled the low temperature and illuminated the surroundings. Around Lu Cheng, white gas gradually swirled, forming a domain of decreasing temperature in a small area. The closer it was to his body, the closer it was to his normal temperature. 30 minutes later, a sudden gust of wind blew in the room. It swept up heavy snow as if it was polar. Lu Cheng slowly opened his eyes. Looking at the wind and snow that covered his tracks, he gradually understood. He got up and started practicing his moves with his fists and legs. Outside the laboratory, Suchin stayed in the break room. He lit a cigarette, poured himself a glass of water, and started playing with his phone while waiting for Lu Cheng to come out. An hour passed quickly. He glanced at his watch and walked out of the room, puzzled. He went to the observation window and saw that the wind and snow were everywhere. Lu Cheng's figure was faintly discernible as he circled around faster and faster. Suchin took a deep breath. He shifted his gaze away from the observation window and returned to the break room. He sighed to himself. Lu Cheng lived up to his reputation. He sat down again and tried his best to focus on his phone. However, he still looked outside from time to time to see if Lu Cheng had come out. 10 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour, an hour. Suchin finally couldn't take it anymore. He walked to the observation window and bent down slightly to look inside. At this time, the wind and snow had stopped. Lu Cheng was sitting cross-legged. There wasn't a trace of snow on his body. Is he okay? Suchin turned to look at the laboratory staff in the control room. A man with neat bangs looked at the surveillance data and said, "What could be wrong with him? He's fine." Suchin looked around in shock. He shifted his gaze back and forth between the control room and the observation window. He made a lot of guesses. He collected his thoughts and returned to the break room. He picked up his phone absent-mindedly. 10 minutes. 20 minutes. Time passed quickly. Suchin gradually became numb. All that was left was a blank expression.
It wasn't until 5:25 in the afternoon that he heard the sealed door open.
He rushed over and saw Lu Cheng walking out steadily with wet clothes. Next time, set the ambient temperature to -90 degrees. Lu Cheng nodded thoughtfully and picked up his bag. Suchin felt like he was struck by lightning. He was stunned for a moment before answering, "Okay." He followed Lu Cheng out of the polar laboratory like a zombie and instinctively led him to an exclusive break room. After Lu Cheng finished bathing and changing his clothes, he finally calmed down and asked, "Mr. Lu, would you like to have dinner here? The restaurant is right in front." Lu Cheng smiled and said, "No, I'll take care of it myself." Next, he had to taste the delicacies of Moshang. He had to prepare in advance for his vacation with Ku. "Okay." Suchin didn't say anything else. He led Lu Cheng forward and approached the exit. At this time, Lei Feng, Zhang Yu and the others had rested for a while. With the help of a professional masseuse, they relaxed and headed to the restaurant to comfort their empty stomachs. Just as they reached the entrance of the restaurant, Lei Feng suddenly saw a familiar figure coming from another direction. He looked over and felt like he had been struck by lightning. He blurted out, "Junior Master." "What is Junior Master doing here?" Hearing Lei Feng's voice, Zhang Yu, Chen Qiue and the others looked over and saw Lu Cheng, whom they hadn't seen in a long time. They were shocked and puzzled. His face was rosy and he was walking steadily. He didn't look injured at all. "He's recovering well." They suddenly realized and confirmed Lu Cheng's declaration that he would fight in the martial arts world again in August or September. Lu Cheng smiled and nodded at Lei Feng. Seeing that he was in a daze and didn't have any intention of greeting him, Lu Cheng didn't bother. After greeting everyone, he walked past the restaurant and turned towards the entrance. Watching him leave, Zhang Yu asked Lei Feng, puzzled, "Why is your junior master here? Is he going to start with Wuxia Club?" Lei Feng shook his head and looked confused. "I don't know either." After sending Lu Cheng away, Suchin took out his phone and made a call. After a while, the call went through. He greeted respectfully, "Hello, Mr. Zhang." "Hello. Assistant Zhang." Lu Cheng left, asked Zhang Juotao, Gun King Huang Ku's assistant. He glanced at Huang Ku in the car and saw the silent Gun King with his eyes closed as though he was taking a nap. Suchin pulled himself together and said with a fawning smile, "He just left."
He spent almost 4 hours in the polar laboratory in the afternoon. It was minus 75 degrees Celsius. He recounted the events that he had experienced and was very confused about.
Minus 75 degrees Celsius. Almost 4 hours.
Zhang Juetao was in a daze, wondering if he had heard wrongly. He subconsciously tilted his head and looked at Huang Ku. He didn't know when, but Gun King had opened his eyes.
His gaze was deep. Chapter 6:15. Zhang Juetao was shocked. He quickly retracted his gaze, gave Su Chen a perfunctory reply, and hung up. The nanny van suddenly became extremely quiet. Only the faint sound of the car moving echoed in the empty space. Gun King Huang Ku, with his broad forehead, closed his eyes again, as though he hadn't woken up. However, Zhang Juetao vaguely heard a sigh. Lei Fong returned to his residence, sat on the sofa, and propped his legs on the coffee table. After resting for a while, he took out his phone and sent Mo Jingting a WeChat message. "I saw Martial Uncle Lu at Wuxia Club." Mo Jingting happened to have nothing to do. She asked curiously, "What's he doing there?" Lei Fong pressed the voice button and said, "I heard he's borrowing the Polar Lab. Martial Uncle is about to return to the professional martial arts circle. It's normal for him to borrow the Polar Lab to remove hidden dangers and readjust his condition." Mo Jingting also made a guess. Lei Fong was silent for a moment. Suddenly he sighed. "Sometimes, I really admire Martial Uncle Lu. If I had suffered such a serious injury that took me a year to recover, with all kinds of sequelae and all kinds of media exposing my scars, I might not have been able to take it and would have given up long ago. If one wanted to truly walk out of this kind of injury, without an extremely strong will and perseverance, it would definitely be impossible." Mo Jingting laughed. "Don't talk about Martial Uncle like that. Even if he was delayed for a year, he's still a fourth pin Dan stage fighter under the age of 23. He still has 7 years to break through to the physical invulnerability stage and make the great leap." She wanted to casually criticize Lei Fong, but she forced herself to hold back. "Yeah, that's the foundation of a heavenly son of the era." Lei Fong sighed. "I wonder how this injury will affect Martial Uncle Lu in the future. Even if it does, he can make up for it in a few years. Martial Uncle still has 7 years, Mo Jingting answered with uncertainty. In Gun King Huang Ku's villa, Zhang Yu and Chen Qiue, who were too lazy to go home, were also talking about Lu Cheng. Why did he suddenly appear in the guild? Zhang Yu frowned slightly and muttered. In the past year, Lu Cheng's figure had almost disappeared from the public eye. Even his Weibo was only posted once every 10 days or half a month or even longer. A lot of things were reported by others, giving people a feeling that he was very, very deep and would not appear again. Who would have thought that they would meet him in Wuxia Club all of a sudden? The baby-faced Chen Qiue asked in confusion, "Didn't you say you wanted to borrow the Polar Laboratory?" It seems that it won't be long before he returns to the professional martial arts circle. Zhang Yu nodded slightly. I wonder how much of his strength he still has. Chen Qiue guessed curiously. It's said that with such a serious injury, there will be long-term sequelae. Even if his body fully recovers, his strength won't be able to return to its peak in a year or so. Zhang Yu picked up the cup of water and took a sip. She agreed. Also, being able to play in the Pro League and fully recovering are two different things. She put down her cup and suddenly said, "However, Lu Cheng is still very young. He still has plenty of time to solve the follow-up problems and enough years to try to make the great leap. Speaking of which, his chances are greater than mine and yours. It can't be helped. Comparisons are odious." Chen Qiue agreed with his senior sister's judgment. He spread his hands and said self-deprecatingly, "This is the heavenly son of the era. A starving camel is still bigger than a horse." Zhang Yu was about to say something else when she suddenly saw a figure standing on the balcony next door from the corner of her eye. She took a closer look and whispered in shock, "Master!" Chen Qiue followed her gaze and looked out of the window. Sure enough, he saw Gun King Huang Ku standing on the edge of the balcony, almost blending into the darkness as he silently looked into the distance. "Master, what's wrong?" Chen Qiue whispered in confusion. His master always woke up early and went to bed early. At this time, he should have been in bed long ago.
Zhang Yu retracted her gaze, not daring to look again. She shook her head in confusion. In the next 20 days, Lu Cheng went to the Wuxia club every 3 to 4 days to use the polar laboratory to help him train. Gradually, he endured the lower temperature. For the rest of the time, he comprehended the secret arts in the morning and accompanied Yen Zheka to tour the mountains and rivers in the afternoon and at night. They strolled in the mountains and explored various delicacies. Sometimes, he would share the contents of his training notes that didn't involve the secret arts of the sect with his little fairy. After all, everyone was walking the path of cosmic starry sky that was balanced into Dan. These days were beautiful and fulfilling. In the blink of an eye, it was almost the end of August. Lu Cheng had grasped the basics of all 9 Ice Sect physical invulnerability moves. Of course, the so-called basics meant that he could leave the secret hall and the visualization diagram to train. Except for the Millennium Ice Wall, Enemy Heart Freezing move, Ice Spirit Holy Light, and Boundless Starry Sky, Absolute Frost, which had a solid foundation, the rest would take him 2 to 3 months to grasp the basics. The cultivation of physical invulnerability was heavy and long. This day, in the afternoon, in the polar laboratory, the monitoring screen in the outer control room showed the temperature inside, -136 degrees Celsius. This wasn't a shocking figure, as the ultra-low temperature cold treatment system, which was popular among the rich and powerful in professional competitions, could easily achieve this. However, users who received treatment or used it to recover from fatigue could only stay for a short period of time. If they stayed for too long, their lives would be in danger. At this moment, the monitoring data showed that the polar ground had been maintained for 27 minutes. Lu Cheng stood on the cold, hard, silver-white floor. His heart was beating violently, spurting out hot blood with some fire force that traveled throughout his body. He felt that if he were to slow down by half a beat, his muscles would start to freeze, and his cells would start to freeze one by one. He would become a veritable ice sculpture. His spirit was slowly retracting, and he had no strength to open his eyes. He was surrounded by darkness, an extremely cold darkness. At this moment, Lu Cheng felt as though he was truly standing in the middle of the universe. His body was radiating light and heat, attempting to illuminate a region and warm life. Like a star, the two maintained a delicate balance. Only ice is eternal, darkness is the final destination, and all heat will eventually be extinguished. Such a thought suddenly appeared in Lu Cheng's mind. He raised his almost frozen right hand and pressed the round button that required him to open the sealed door. After a short while, he walked out of the polar ground with his own strength. Thump, thump, thump. His heart was beating more and more violently, allowing his body to slowly and steadily recover from its nearly frozen state. The fatigue in his body seemed to have been expelled. After recovering, Lu Cheng asked for his own data report, took a hot shower, and changed into clean and fresh clothes. Every martial artist who used the Polar Ground Laboratory would leave behind monitored data. However, this was a secret, and the experimenters had no right to see it unless they had the permission of the martial artist. From the second time, Su Chen didn't wait outside. He would only come over when it was almost over. Today, Lu Cheng ended early and didn't try more. Therefore, he slowly walked through the corridor of the Wuxia Club building and walked out of this quiet and cool place. At the entrance, a fiery red car rolled down the window, revealing Yen Zheka's beautiful face. She pursed her lips and smiled, waving her hand playfully. "Hey, are you alone?" Little Fairy's imitation of a pickup line was not at all convincing. Lu Cheng shook his head and laughed. "You should say that. Hey, do you have a date?" Yen Zheka's eyes flashed as she glared at him. She slapped the seat beside her and said, "Are you getting in or not? If not, I'm leaving." Today was the day they returned to Xiaofan. This is a tyrant's promise. Lu Cheng went to the other side, opened the door and got in. As for the luggage, of course, it had been packed long ago. Back in Xiaofan, the couple went to their own homes. Lu Cheng just took out the key to open the door when he heard his mother's nagging. "You brat, why didn't you come home when you were in danger on a trip? Why did you stay in Wuxia for so long?" Lu Cheng chuckled and said, "Didn't I break through? I went to the sect to stabilize my state and practice new martial arts. Yes, my connection with heaven and earth is stable now. I'm a real physical invulnerability expert." Breakthrough. Qi Feng didn't understand for a moment. Lu Jisheng,
who was casually changing the channel, raised his head. He didn't have time to push his gold-rimmed glasses and blurted out, "You're a physical invulnerability expert?" Even an ordinary family, after so many years of influence, knew the meaning of carp leaping over Dragon Gate. "You're a physical invulnerability expert?" Xiaofan asked like a repeater. How did he become a physical invulnerability expert in such a short time? "Yeah." Lu Cheng smiled and threw his new backpack on the sofa. He told his parents what had happened. Of course, he left out the parts that were too exciting and frightening. Not bad, not bad. Xiaofan was too excited. Even after racking her brain, she could only come up with this one word. Lu Jisheng picked up his personal thermos and sipped tea to hide his emotions. However, after drinking for a long time, he only drank tea leaves. He forgot to add water. Not bad. In the end, he was possessed by Xiaofan and only said these two words. When he calmed down, Xiaofan asked with concern, "Cheng, you're already a physical invulnerability expert. Are you still going back to the Longhu Club?" "Yes," Lu Cheng said cheerfully. "Dragon King called me a while ago to ask about it." I agreed. Without any hesitation, he said that he would go after stabilizing his state and mastering the Ice Sex physical invulnerability chapters. They would talk about the contract then. That's good. That's good. Lu Jisheng sighed. I met that kid from the Wang family 2 days ago. He has been away for almost half a year. He opened a snack bar with Xiaofan specialties near a shopping mall in Gaofan. Business is good. In the big city, no one collects protection fees. He can sell for 2,000 to 3,000 yuan a day. You guys are all grown up. After hearing about Wang Su's situation, Lu Cheng, who couldn't contact him, felt relieved. That's good. That's good. On the evening of August 30th, in Yan Zheka's bedroom, the couple covered themselves with an air-conditioned blanket and talked about how they would go their separate ways tomorrow. You're a physical invulnerability expert now. Will it be difficult to get a visa? Yan Zheka looked up and asked worriedly. Lu Cheng chuckled and said, I asked. I can still get one, but I can't go over for no reason. I can't stay for too long either. As Yan Zheka was returning to Connecticut the next day, he got permission from his parents-in-law to stay in the guest room. Taking advantage of the dark and windy night, he sneaked over to his wife's side to sleep. Okay, I'll cherish every holiday. Yan Zheka bit her pink lips lightly. After going through so much, they were pretty sure about each other. The next day, after sending off his little fairy girl, Lu Cheng went to the departure hall in China. He arrived in Huaqing at 3 in the afternoon. He didn't inform the club's assistant to pick him up. He carried his luggage and hailed a taxi. Passing through the familiar yet unfamiliar streets, he appeared outside the Longhu Club once again. The scenery here didn't seem to have changed. After paying the fare, Lu Cheng stood at the entrance. He took a deep look at the dragon coil and tiger crouching plaques, smiled, and walked in. P.S. Third update for you. Looking for recommendation and monthly tickets on Mondage. Chapter 616. Lu Cheng wasn't a reckless person. After he got off the plane, he gave Dragon King and Empress Luo a call so that the club wouldn't catch him off guard. After confirmation, Dragon King had gone to the military base, but Empress Luo was in her office. Unwilling to wait, Lu Cheng declined Ning Zitong's offer to send a member of the assistant team to pick him up. Instead, he took a taxi to Longhu Club. With a smile on his face, he stepped through the door. Under the shocked gazes of the security guards in the guardhouse, he followed the pattern of the dark-colored tiles and walked through the wide corridor. He stopped at the elevator door and habitually didn't register. The security guards also habitually let him in. Ding dong. When the elevator on the left arrived, the metal doors opened. A tanned, skinny young man with a parted hairstyle walked out slowly. He was Huang Bin from the assistant team. He had his head down and was flipping through the documents in his hands. Just as he left the car, he sensed something and instinctively looked up at the guest who was about to take the elevator. Mr. Lu. Huang Bin recognized Lu Cheng and got a shock. The documents in his hands fell to the ground and scattered. Long time no see. Lu Cheng chuckled and helped Huang Bin catch the documents. His palm didn't look special,
but it seemed to cover the surroundings and didn't let a single piece of paper fall to the ground. Sure, long time no see.
Huang Bin received the documents in a daze.
Talk to you later.
Lu Cheng stepped into the elevator and nodded. Huang Bin nodded hurriedly and stared blankly as the metal doors closed. Just as Lu Cheng reached the 5th floor, walked through the corridor, and knocked on Empress Luo's office door, news of his sudden appearance in the club had already spread through the airwaves. What? Lu Cheng is here?
In the assistant team's office, Amen and the rest were shocked. Lu Cheng is here at the club?
Asked the valiant Lu Xiaofan in the reserve team's training ground. She looked at the masculine and tough leader, Tu Zheng. Tu Zheng frowned and said, "Someone from the assistant team saw him."
A year had passed, but he was still stuck at the level close to physical invulnerability. The pressure on him was getting stronger and stronger. Many of those who were as famous as him had yet to make the breakthrough. Only Go Wan of the Xuanwu sect and Meng Liang of the Shizhou Island had succeeded. Regardless of whether it was Ji Ran of the Daxing Temple, Ming Shi of the Shangqing sect, Qing Feng of the Shushen study, or Wang Xian of the Yanzhao sect, they were all still stuck. The Dragon's Gate was not so easy to leap over.
He's really going to return to the Pro League. The muscular and round-faced Yu Wang Yuan said thoughtfully.
Lu Xiaofan nodded and said, "It seems that his sequela has been resolved." With his momentum back then, without this 1 year of delay, who knows what level he would be at now?
Sun Jianlin, who was like a passerby, said with some emotion.
Jia Lu, who had been watching the show from the sidelines, rolled her watery eyes and chuckled.
No matter what, he's back. I thought it would be the low-level professional league players who came back first.
Tu Zhang relaxed his eyebrows and spoke with the authority of a captain.
Since he's back, he's still our teammate. Try not to mention anything about his injuries.
Also, no matter what he went through, I believe that his foundation is still there.
All of you, including me, have to buck up and not lose to him. As young high-pin players, Lu Xiaofan, Yu Wang Yuan, and the rest were naturally competitive.
Hearing this, they replied loudly, "Yes, Captain too."
Knock, knock, knock. Lu Cheng knocked rhythmically on Ning Zitong's office door.
He heard a clear voice. "Come in." He opened the door and stepped in.
He saw Ning Zitong sitting behind a dark red desk.
Her hair was down and draped over her shoulders.
Her facial features were beautiful and elegant. Taking a deep look at Lu Cheng, Ning Zitong shook her head and smiled.
"Your generation of heavenly sons of the era really lives up to their name.
None of you fell behind. 2 of them made the great leap at the age of 23, and 2 of them achieved physical invulnerability at the age of 22. As for the living Buddha, there was no need to mention him. Ranli turned 22 in July, about 5 months younger than Lu Cheng. Of course, she started martial arts much earlier.
Everyone worked very hard."
As Empress Luo wasn't just praising him, she was also praising Priest and Chihuahua. Lu Cheng couldn't be humble and could only reply casually. As they had returned from Nile late, Peng Liyun and Ren Li were still practicing their respective sects' physical invulnerability chapters. They hadn't officially announced their promotions to the public. Ning Zitong leaned back and curled her lips into a smile. "When I first heard about your breakthrough from the Dragon King, I almost thought that he had finally learned how to joke after 30 years. In the end, I'm old now. I can't keep up with you youngsters. What's even worse is that this kid didn't even rely on external help. He broke through the bottleneck and made the great leap on his own." Without waiting for Lu Cheng's reply, she stood up and said, "Let's go to the core team to meet our future teammates. As for the contract, I'll get your lawyer to discuss it later. You won't be mistreated."
"Sure."
Lu Cheng didn't seem to care much and smiled. In the reserve team's practice field, Yu Wang Yuan, who was doing relaxation exercises, said casually, "Lu Cheng is back again. Lu Cheng has returned to the team. Should we hold another welcome banquet?" "There's no need for that. Isn't this a reminder to him?" Lu Xiaofan shook her head and replied. She continued with anticipation, "I wonder how much he has recovered. Leader 2, why don't we bring forward the practice to tomorrow?" Her words made Jia Lu, Sun Jianlin, and the rest eager to give it a try. Tu Zheng finished his training. He held his phone, thought for a while, and said, "Forget it. Let him get used to it for a few days." At this moment, His palm vibrated and a message came in. Tu Zhang lowered his head and his expression changed. He blurted out, "Lu Cheng has gone to the core team." "Him? A new teammate?" Long Zhan, who was called out by Empress Luo from the individual practice field, got a shock when he saw Lu Cheng. When he heard that there was a new physical invulnerability expert joining, he racked his brains but couldn't figure out who it could be. He was filled with curiosity and questions. There were limited physical invulnerability experts. Even if they didn't know each other well, they were still familiar with each other. Long Zhan believed that if there was really someone who jumped ship, he would definitely have received news beforehand. As for those who had just broken through, there were only a few every year. Everyone was treated with respect. Not only was Long Zhen surprised, martial arts fanatic Wuxia was also shocked. If Lu Cheng had continued his momentum from a year ago, she would have believed it if he said that he had broken through to the physical invulnerability stage. However, he had been severely injured for a year and was tormented by the aftereffects for a long time. How did he suddenly make the great leap? Beside her, the team member cum coach, Lu Yan's eyes flickered. He sized Lu Cheng up in shock and doubt. He was middle-aged, but his hair was already half white. His facial features were handsome and chiseled. However, one could sense his arrogance just by looking at his face. In the past, because the Dragon King gave Lu Cheng the exceptional treatment of a quasi-physical invulnerability expert, he had always avoided this heavenly son of the era. Ning Zitong was satisfied with the current outcome. She laughed pleasantly. He broke through in Nile at the beginning of August. After she finished speaking, she looked at Lu Cheng and raised her chin, indicating that she was ready to go. Lu Cheng smiled and took half a step forward. He opened his mind and showed the connection. Instantly, the surroundings darkened and a chill seeped into his bones. At the same time, sparks of fire appeared one after another, warming the surroundings. Seeing this, Lu Yan, Long Zhan, and Guojie no longer had any doubts. However, they were caught in their own emotions and were momentarily speechless. Impressive, impressive. To be able to break through after a year of severe injuries and delay, you are indeed impressive. Long Zhan was the first to give a thumbs up. I have the Dragon King in front of me and the army behind me. It's really not easy to become the leader of the club. He would never ignore the results of others and would sincerely praise them. However, he would never admit defeat and would not allow others to easily surpass him. If not for the past year of severe injuries and delay, I might have needed another 2 to 3 years, or even 4 to 5 years to break through. I might even never break through. Lu Qing thought to himself calmly. Guojie's eyebrows relaxed.
She nodded and said, "Let's spar later."
As expected of the martial arts fanatic, Lu Cheng laughed to himself. Lu Yan, on the other hand, maintained his dignity and nodded. I have indeed underestimated you back then. Since you have made the great leap, you are fully deserving of being a member of the core team. At this moment, Ning Zitong flipped her wrist and looked at her watch. All right, I'll bring him to meet the reporters. They should be here by now. After Lu Cheng got off the plane and called, she instructed the Foreign Affairs team to contact the various media outlets in Huaqing. In the Longhu Club's conference room, the Foreign Affairs team had completed the preparations for the press conference. They say it has something to do with Lu Cheng? A reporter turned to ask his colleague. The girl with chestnut red hair nodded. That's what I heard too. Lu Cheng previously announced that he would be able to return to the arena in 4 to 5 months. That was the beginning of April. It's about time now. Did he join the Longhu Club again? The reporter who asked the question first guessed. He wore narrow-rimmed spectacles and was very fashionable. That's a good word for again. Another cultured reporter laughed. Lu Cheng is going back to being Mrs. Feng. This idiom meant returning to one's old profession. It's a pity that Lu Cheng has been delayed for a year.
He has fallen out of the ranks of the heavenly sons of China.
The female reporter with chestnut red hair sighed. At this moment, Ning Zitong and Lu Cheng entered the conference room and sat behind the podium. This isn't important enough. There's only Empress Luo here. The reporter with narrow-rimmed spectacles sensed the abnormality. The cultured reporter nodded in agreement. Indeed, Lu Cheng hasn't changed much. He's just more reserved. At this moment, Lu Cheng had already changed into the navy blue Longhu Club martial arts suit. He looked steady and masculine, without a hint of a student's aura. Ning Zitong raised her hand to signal for silence. She smiled and said, "I'm the only one accompanying Lu Cheng this time because he no longer needs the support of physical invulnerability experts. He already has the qualifications to sit here." Click, click, click. The cameras flashed continuously. The reporters quickly recorded Empress Luo's words, but they didn't understand the true meaning behind them. Ning Zitong cleared her throat and continued. "I'm going to announce something now. Lu Cheng has rejoined the Longhu Club and officially entered the core team." Indeed, he's rejoining the Longhu Club. The reporters were stunned at first. They split up and took notes. Then, they realized that there was something wrong with those words. They jerked their heads up and shifted their focus back and forth between Ning Zitong and Lu Cheng. Core team? Official member of the core team of the Longhu Club? P.S. Looking for recommendation tickets and monthly tickets. Chapter 6:17. To the various media outlets, core team was what the Longhu Club called themselves and used in official reports. Most of the time it had a more popular, more widely known, and more accepted nickname. Physical Invulnerability Team. Any official member of this team was a physical invulnerability mighty one who had made the great leap. Connecting the dots, the meaning of Empress Luo was. The reporters retracted their gazes and looked at each other excitedly. Some were confused, some were at a loss, and some were excited. It was as though they had caught the scent of big news. Is it true? Did Lu Cheng really make the great leap and reach the heavens? But he had just recovered from a serious injury a year ago. How could he become a physical invulnerability expert? His low point back then could be proven by his occasional Weibo posts. A comeback and a promotion seemed like two completely unrelated matters. Their eyes kept meeting. Because the news was too sudden, too shocking, and too unbelievable, the reporters forgot to raise their hands to ask questions. They were afraid that their guesses would make a fool of themselves. After a few seconds, someone finally stood up. A female reporter with chestnut red hair looked at Ning Zitong and asked in a trembling voice, "Empress Luo, do you mean that Lu Cheng made the great leap and became a physical invulnerability expert?" The moment she said that, the reporters held their breaths. The conference room was so quiet that you could hear a pin drop. Ning Zitong looked around and smiled elegantly. Yes. With a boom, the entire conference room was in an uproar. The reporters whispered into each other's ears. They couldn't stop discussing. Oh my God, he just recovered. Was the news of his injury fake? No matter how fake it was, he wouldn't post a farewell on Weibo. Let me do the math. According to Lu Cheng himself, there was hope for him to recover in July or August. In other words, he used a month to become a physical invulnerability expert? This is the speed of a living Buddha. After letting the reporters talk for a while, Ning Zitong smiled and said, "If you have any questions, feel free to ask. The main character is here. There aren't many chances." The female reporter with chestnut red hair took advantage of the fact that she was still standing and looked at Lu Cheng excitedly. "Mr. Lu Cheng, may I know when you made the great leap?" They didn't doubt the authenticity of the news. After all, Empress Luo's appearance at the press conference was equivalent to endorsing the Longhu Club's reputation. Moreover, Lu Cheng would definitely participate in top professional competitions and title matches in the future. Even if he could hide it for a while, he couldn't hide it forever. Lu Cheng shifted the microphone and answered frankly, "Early August." Boom! The conference room exploded once again. Every reporter was extremely excited. The reporter with narrow-rimmed glasses raised his hand and stood up. He hurriedly asked, "When did you recover from your previous injury? How did you get injured?" Lu Cheng ignored the latter question and calmly recalled, "Actually, I recovered at the beginning of the year, but there were some sequelae. In order to solve this problem, I made an attempt in March. You can treat it as a surgery. This attempt was very successful, and I completely got rid of the injury. After recuperating, I fully recovered by the end of June. In other words, you've made the great leap from the inhuman stage to the physical invulnerability stage in just a month." The cultured reporter stood up and asked. He had already thought of his headline. If Lu Cheng answered yes, he would say, comparable to the living Buddha. If not, he would say, unbelievable. Lu Cheng pursed his lips, deliberated over his words, and answered with a sigh and a smile. You can't say that. Actually, I'm very grateful for this injury and the low point of the past year. It allowed me to truly find my own path. It allowed me to see my heart clearly, strengthen my will, and accumulate enough experience to break through to the physical invulnerability stage. This was the key to making the great leap. He didn't drop the book, but a sentence he learned in the past flashed across his mind. The sharpness of a sword comes from grinding, and the fragrance of plum blossoms comes from the bitter cold. This line of words is pretty smooth. He didn't deny it, but he didn't confirm it either. The cultured reporter thought to himself. He planned to ask another question to enrich the content of his article. However, at this moment, he noticed from the corner of his eye that almost all the text reporters were writing furiously. It was obvious that they had started writing news articles in an attempt to snatch the headlines. This bunch of B** cheese. The cultured reporter threw away his question, thanked him hurriedly, and sat down to edit the content. Core team? Hearing Tu Zheng's words, the heroic Lu Xiaofei raised her voice. This was the place of her dreams, the goal of her dreams. However, it was so far away. Sun Jianlin was also puzzled. He frowned and asked, "Are you going to pay a visit to a physical invulnerability expert again?" According to the rules, there should be such a process, even though this was the second time the other party had joined. Tu Zhang retracted his expression and couldn't help but turn solemn. Empress Luo and the rest have never liked complicated formalities. It was clear what he was implying. Things weren't that simple. Yu Wangyuan and the rest opened and closed their mouths. They fell silent. They already had a guess in their hearts, but they didn't dare to believe the answer. You must be kidding. Lu Cheng might not be able to do that even if he was healthy for a year, let alone being heavily injured for a year. In the stifling silence, Yu Wangyuan spoke in a deep voice. Perhaps Lu Cheng has really become a physical invulnerability expert. How can that be possible? Tu Zheng's speech was getting slower and slower, and his voice was getting softer and softer. It was as though he wasn't willing to face it, but he had to admit it. Jia Lu stopped looking at him like a bystander and sighed with a smile. You don't say. I think it's true. He's a heavenly son of the era who creates miracles time and time again. Perhaps he has profited from his misfortune? Tu Zhang opened his mouth and was about to speak again when he suddenly received another message from Optimus Prime, Long Zhen. He scanned the message again and again, and again, and again. Finally, he believed that he wasn't hallucinating. After a few seconds of silence, he lowered his head and said, Lu Cheng has become a physical invulnerability expert. These 5 simple words reverberated in the training field of the reserve team, giving off a feeling that they were as heavy as 1,000 kilograms. There was another moment of silence. Lu Xiaofei stared blankly ahead. Her mind was in a mess, and she didn't know what she was thinking about. Yu Wangyuan was stunned at first, then shook his head and smiled bitterly. He shook his head again and again. Sun Jianlin took a deep breath and wanted to say something, but he swallowed his words. Jia Lu was also focused on the green brick in front of her. The patterns on it seemed to be filled with artistic beauty. She suddenly laughed softly and mumbled to herself, "All right, now I don't have to be afraid of being left behind by him." Yes, there's no point in comparing a physical invulnerability expert to an inhuman expert. They had been left far behind, to the point where they couldn't even see the back of the other party. Yu Wangyuan smiled bitterly and said, "Some people are born to attack others. My self-confidence has been destroyed by him." Tu Zhang, Lu Xiaofei, and the rest were silent again. Although they didn't want to admit it, they didn't want to lie to themselves. In the new campus of Songqing University, Yan Xiaoling, who was in her last year of university, stood by the window of the dormitory. She looked at the looming Weishui Lake in the distance and felt a little sad. She wanted to say a beautiful and elegant sentence, but when the words reached her mouth, she changed her mind. This water thief is King clean. If the school had this money, it would be great to subsidize the canteen. At this moment, her phone on the study table vibrated and rang continuously, as if urging her to do something. Who is it? Yan Xiaoling muttered to herself, walked quickly to her bed, and picked up her phone. She glanced at it and saw that Brahman had sent voice messages one after another. Did something big happen? Yan Xiaoling unlocked the screen in confusion. During her last summer break, she entered the terminal stage of laziness. She even rarely appeared in the QQ group because she was too lazy to type or speak. She clicked on the voice message and put it to her ear. Yan Xiaoling was almost deafened by Brahman's sharp voice. Little Changya, little Changya, little Changya. Look at the news. Look at the news. Look at the news. Quick, quick, quick. Seriously, she's already a girl in her second year of high school, yet she's still so unreserved and childish. Yan Xiaoling secretly mocked Brahman, who was almost 20 centimeters taller than her. She opened Weibo and browsed the headlines. A few seconds later, the familiar name and exaggerated title were reflected in her eyes. Lu Cheng ascends to heaven. Comparable to living Buddha. Returning from tribulation, Lu Cheng attains physical invulnerability. Misfortune may be a blessing in disguise. The heavenly son of the era lives up to his name. What's going on? What's going on? Yan Xiaoling was stunned. She quickly opened the news and browsed the content. Longhu Club held a press conference to announce that Lu Cheng has rejoined the core team. Yan Xiaoling read the opening sentence and finally understood what had happened. She suddenly burst into tears. She had been holding it in for a long time. Then, she smiled and paced back and forth excitedly. She even hummed the lyrics, "I've waited so long for this day." She cried and laughed and cried. After a few cycles, Yan Xiaoling sat on the chair in a daze with a silly smile, as if she had lost her mind. It wasn't until Mu Jinyan came in and patted her head that Yan Xiaoling came back to her senses. She logged into the forum and saw that everyone was in an uproar. Seriously, I can't express my feelings with words," said Unparalleled Dragon King in a rare state. Nye Chi posted, jumping and jumping. "Wife, come out and look at God. Oh my God. Is this what you call a damaged potential? This kind of damaged potential. I want it too." Laughed, all the good names are taken by dogs. Just as Yan Xiaoling joined in their celebration, Poison Milk Hierarch He Xiaowei was browsing the relevant Weibo. He found that everyone was discussing how Lu Cheng could make the great leap so quickly. They were all emotional and excited. Having suffered a few setbacks due to Lu Cheng, He Xiaowei had learned his lesson. He chose to wait and see when it came to matters related to him. Yes, now is the time. He typed satisfactorily and posted on Weibo. I feel that the focus of everyone's discussion is not right. Let's guess how many years Lu Cheng will take to get his first title. P.S. Looking for monthly votes and recommendation votes. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.